right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean radio show and a podcast. And yes, I am your host, Jeff Norton. You can join me live here every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. And we have a show in store for you. It took some rearranging, some cancellations, some miscommunication, all sorts of things. But by God, we have Dr. Jonathan Young going to be joining us here in the Skype line in a few minutes. Long story. I'm sure we'll get to it. And it's all my fault. You know, the things we learn, I have to be honest, the things we learn when we try to do too many tasks at the same time, and that is don't do those things. Well, I'm sure we'll get a good chuckle out of it when Dr. Young joins us. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. It is the month of Movember. If you don't know what that is, then I suggest you go out to the midnightocean.com, click on the link, join a team, find out a little bit more before you start shaving your hair on your face. But basically what it is the month of Movember, which is Male Cancer Awareness Month, which is basically all cancers that affect males in particular, prostate, testicular, things like that. But get out there, join a team, help raise money. I will tell you, I think we're well over the team that I've joined, which is Barnacules Nerdgasm. He's a guy that I watch quite a bit on YouTube during the day when I'm not working. So he's got a team together. I joined his team. I think we're well close to, I think we're hitting $3,000 in 3 days. So that's about $1,000 a day. Great opportunity for you to help find a cure, prevention. The one thing about Movember is that they're into prevention as well, which is really, really cool. Prevention, keeping cancer away, and also the cure. So that is why I am very, very motivated to get behind this organization. As you know, I've shaved my goatee and I also shaved my head. It's coming back. It looks like a little bad now, kind of scratchy. But get out there to our website at themidnightocean.com. You'll see the Movember logo on the right-hand side. Click on that. That'll take you over to Barnacules, the team page. Get signed up, make a donation, do what you can do. If you don't have any money, that's okay. We understand. But you can shave your face. You can shave your face and then tell people why you shaved your face. Now, the other part of that is you can't shave. Once you shave, you can't shave for a month. So for the whole month of November. So the cool thing is, guys, if you want to grow a beard or get a little goatee or, some streaks going there, you can do that. Tell your wife, tell your girlfriend, tell your family, hey, look, it's for cancer. What, who's going to argue with that? If you ever want to grow out a beard and not catch grief from the family, that is a good way. No one, who is going to complain? So that's about it. So get out there, do that. Of course, now, if you are joining us on social media, thank you very much. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That's very important to us, the subscribe button. And if you are following on Facebook Live, also make sure you read the message right below this feed, because Facebook is up to their old games again, where they're disconnecting us for no reason. And so make sure you do that. And what happens is once they disconnect us from the Facebook Live, we cannot reconnect. So read that little message. Join us on YouTube. Love to have you. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at the MN Ocean. That's at the MN Ocean. And for tweets and things of that nature, we won't spam you. The only thing that we send out on Twitter are things that are associated with the show. Tell you who the guests are for the night, upcoming events, things like that. We don't send out a bunch of, what I've been getting lately is a lot of political ads. Not into it. I get a ton of them every day, and I have no desire to receive them anymore. I already know who I'm voting for. So, stop sending me all of these tweets. I can care less at this point. I just want it to be over. I'll take Mickey Mouse. How about that? I'm going to write in Mickey Mouse. So, oh, Lord. All right. So let's change subject here. Let's get on with our guest, Dr. Jonathan Young. A little background on Dr. Young. He is a psychologist and storyteller who is frequently seen on the History Channel as an expert commentator. He is a contributing producer of Ancient Alien series and appears regularly to comment on mythology and psychological themes. He assisted mythologist Joseph Campbell for several years at seminars and was as the founding curator of the Joseph Campbell Archive and Library in Santa Barbara, California. His articles and books focus on personal mythology. He also has done home study audio courses on the wisdom of mythic stories. He developed his deep love of stories through the extensive initial exposure to folklore. He was one of 6 children in a much-traveled family. His parents read and discussed the lore of each place they visited. So he learned about the Little Mermaids in Copenhagen, the Pied Piper in Hamelin, the Arabian Nights in Baghdad, and the life of Buddha in India, and so forth. Dr. Young lives in Santa Barbara when not traveling to give presentations on mythic imagination. You can check out his website at folkstory.com. Jonathan is with us today to discuss how contact and extraterrestrial intelligence is presented in movies. Welcome, Dr. Young.
Jeffrey, nice to be here. Thank you for having me on the program.
Yeah, finally, right? Finally. We finally got our schedules coordinated. And
there's an old saying I like to twist a little. All's well that ends.
This is true. This is so true. And for those that don't know, it's all my fault. Dr. Young has been gracious. He would have been our 4th or 5th guest on the show. But, it all worked out. Like you said, it did work out because the shows have grown in popularity and the production of them is so much better now. So I guess things happen for a reason. Someone said, if you always wanted to make God laugh, tell him what your plans were. Right?
That's right.
So that's it. So,
right.
So let's just jump right in because I am so fascinated. Of course, my exposure to you, I think like most of my listeners, has been through the Ancient Alien series and everything. But I want to kind of back away from that, for a little bit. And I want to just kind of get into your background as a psychologist. I think is very important. And I don't think it's really, it's not the forefront. People don't ask you about your psychology work and folklore. Right. They get into the folklore, kind of like, what I did instantly when I first started talking to you. I want to talk about the psychology behind folklore. Why do we have this desire to have these mythological creatures? And I'm not saying they exist or don't exist. I'm just saying that from a psychiatrist standpoint, what's the drive? What's the human drive to create these stories or these fantasies?
Well, my mentor, Joseph Campbell, said that all of the religions of the world started in a cave in Siberia. He was referring to the origins of shamanism, and some wild mystic went into a cave and had a dream and came out in the morning and told a magical story, and that began folklore and mythology and religion and the whole study of the inner life. So it goes back to a dream. Freud said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. That is, we can learn a lot about ourselves if we study our dreams. Some of the dreams become the great guiding stories of a culture, whether it is fairy tale or folklore or legend or saga or mythology or religious scripture. We have these enormous stories that some of them are magical and spooky, some of them are urban legends that have ghosts and things. Some of them are about the gods. And more recently, they have been about visitations from unknown places. And the stories are very compelling. We're fascinated by them, not only because they could impact our world, but because they mean something to us personally. And this is where the psychological part comes in. The ancient shamans were the psychologists of their time, as well as being the doctors and the priests and a lot of other things. Somebody needs to help treat the emotional upsets of every age. So now we have the whole world of psychotherapy and counseling that is not just going to see somebody for your own personal problems, but people on television talking about how to understand life and how to get along with others and how to deal with family life and how to deal with your own hopes and dreams. And that's where the stories come in, because we have a personal story, a life story, or personal mythology that is the guiding pattern of our own development. And then we have these big stories that are happening around us, and at some point they connect to each other. So understanding our personal psychology is all about understanding stories.
So do you find that people, I mean, because most of the mythology that's out there, most of the stories that you hear are dark in nature. So if I'm hearing you correctly and I'm kind of following along the line here, when they talk about we're going to talk about the black-eyed children and the dogmen and all that. Do you feel that then that's rooted in, like you said, the personal mythology of the person and the times that they live in and stuff? So they tend to gravitate or perceive that they're seeing black-eyed children. And I'm not saying that when people, trust me, because we're going to get into this a little bit further. But, do you feel that we're kind of manifesting our own mythology?
Yes, to some degree. And Carl Jung, I'm more or less Jungian in my theoretical orientation. Carl Jung thought that this was what he called projection. That is, the stories, whether they are sightings or personal experiences or very vivid dreams that are confusing as to whether they really happened or not, that they carry our own projections, that is, our own hopes and fears. And I wouldn't say all the stories are dark, or even the majority. I think they're about evenly split. There are a lot of encounters with angels and sightings of fairies or the fascinating, transcendent, radiant creatures that are very helpful. And then there are spooky ones. And we just are coming off Halloween here, so we had a whole celebration of the ghostly and the scary part of this. Yeah. And it has to do with whether we're in a good mood or a bad mood. And when we're in a bad mood, we're likely to see some werewolf that wants to bite us. And when we're in a good mood, we're likely to see some angelic character that's going to do us a favor.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other part that I have a hard time with is like mass sightings and UFOs could fit into this whole thing of folklore mythology if you wanted to, even from your standpoint. Some psychiatrists would say, or psychologists would say, well, it's a figment of your imagination. It's a manifestation of whatever, is going through. But when you get into mass sighting, I had this, and it's funny because I look back and I said, if I would have seen a UFO or the UFO that I've seen or that I thought I saw or that I did see, 3 weeks ago, and it was just by myself, I would think of what Lloyd Auerbach told me about a lot of this stuff is manifested inside your brain. You don't actually see it. It's inside your mind, and your mind makes you kind of like a dream state, makes you think that you see this or whatever. But the problem that I have with that is the fact that I was with 3 other people and they all saw the same thing. So how do we?
I'm not the kind of skeptic that doubts the integrity of the witness. The experiencer has had a real experience. They have really seen something, or at least it sure seemed like it. Whether we can touch them or not, that's a little more debatable. But mass sightings make sense to me. Carl Jung wrote a little book about flying saucers in the 1950s, and he thought it had to do with human yearning, that we are so desperate for some transcendent event that we will make it happen, that it's a manifestation of a collective unconscious, and that it is very real, and that people can see it and touch it. that doesn't mean it's real in the sense that a tree is real that has been there and grown up slowly from deep roots. But we could hook people up to lie detectors. They are telling the truth. These are true reports.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, is that if it was just me by myself, that would be the party line that I would carry. Right. But like I said, I was there with 3 other people, and they have the same exact experience. They have the same exact, well, what actually was kind of cool about our sighting is that the description of the craft was different. So that was kind of unique. It wasn't the same. Like I saw a kind of a mirage kind of effect, but you could see through it, but it was a mirage kind of effect. Sandy saw, kind of like wings on it. My next door neighbors who were sitting next to me said it looked like a helicopter, but it wasn't making any noise. So you have 4 different people looking at the same thing, but the description of that object is different to each person, which was kind of unique.
I would not doubt for a moment that 3 witnesses really saw something. Then it gets interesting when we start debating what this might be.
Yeah.
Some will be sure that it is a craft and that it has come from some distant place. There's been the key phrase is usually described as UFO, unidentified flying object. Well, these are all debatable words. People do identify them in some way. They may not be flying. They probably aren't objects. And the nuts and bolts discussion I was going to talk a little bit about these conferences I've been going to, and there are going to be many more. One was Contact in the Desert out near Palm Springs, California. More recently, this last weekend, I was at Alien Con, which was connected to the television program. And there's a good deal of debate. There is what's called the nuts and bolts crowd, which gets into the idea that visitation in some kind of spacecraft is happening, and that the greater intelligence, the advanced civilization, has solved the problems, because the laws of physics make this actually very, very difficult. But they've solved the problems, and they are doing it. And that is not a very big part of the discussion. It was 20 years ago, but the number of people that think along those lines, it seems to be a smaller proportion now. There's more talk about interdimensional travel, like there might be possibly a parallel universe and something is crossing over. We could be having something like time travel, so that what we're seeing is actually human-made, made by us, but in the future, and they have found a way to come back, or at least peek in, and they may not be able to come back far enough to get out of the contraption they're using and talk to us, but they may be able to look at us or something. There are people that have religious ideas that think that this is the latest version of what used to be angelic visitations in the scriptures. You have the angels coming down in fiery chariots and staircases and things like this. So there are a lot of possibilities about what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it goes to the fact too, it's what you wanted. Like I said, is that if your mind, and I was thinking, I put some thought behind this because for me, I saw a UFO because I deal in that world every day with this type of shows and the things we do. Sandy, it's kind of funny that you say that. Sandy is more of a spiritual person, more of a godlike person. So she described it of a, how do I say it, as like an angelic or a dark angelic figure, kind of like what you were hinting to there, because her belief system is that of a spirituality. And then my next door neighbors, and I know I'm not diminishing them, but they're very down, salt of the earth kind of people. Black is black, white is white. And we do have helicopters that fly over our area. We live right on the Gulf. And so we have the Coast Guard they fly their helicopter. We're in their flight path every day, twice a day. They fly their helicopter right over our house and do a U-turn right at my neighbor's house and then go out to the Gulf. And of course, they're describing it as a helicopter. So yeah, it is fascinating what you just said, is that we take our own beliefs and then we try to fit those in and quantify, I guess is the word, of what we see, or qualify, trying to qualify what we see visually.
Yeah, or one fancy word is concretize. That is, we make something in a tangible and defined form, which is actually quite vague.
Yeah.
The vagueness is of some importance psychologically, that it isn't really distinct. You can't quite see the jet engines. You see something. And then the mind starts to fill this in. In police investigations, there is a deep understanding that an eyewitness is not going to give you very reliable data.
Yeah.
That you can have an auto crash and you can have a dozen witnesses and they will give you such wildly different accounts that it's not physically possible that they could line up. They conflict.
Yeah.
And they were right there within a few feet of the event. And they're not being dishonest. It's just that our perception and our memory are not as steady as we think. They're actually quite malleable. They're quite creative. And we will fill in the things that were not clear. And this means that the police aren't really, in fact, the worst kind of legal cases if it rests entirely on eyewitnesses. What you want, if you're involved in a legal situation, is some kind of physical evidence. You want the tire tracks. You want the way the metal crunched. You want to be able to take pictures and take measurements of something you can touch, because that is far more reliable.
Yeah.
What we have from the experiencers like yourself are sightings, things they have seen, or encounters, some kind of conversation with some sort of strange presence, or actual travel where they're abducted and they go someplace. And all we have are the stories. We have a few fuzzy photographs. They're not much help. We can't. I don't trust them. I don't know whether they're fake or just confusing. Mostly, what we have are the earnest efforts of good people trying to tell their story. So what I'm interested is not whether or not it happened, which is a whole debate in its own right. I'm not dismissing it. It's just not my area. I'm interested in, what does it mean after the fact? What does it mean to this person in their life? In many cases, in the experiencers I've talked to, it is the most important event in their whole life experience.
Yeah.
And it's as if they had talked to an angel. Even they're not necessarily putting in those terms, unless, like your friend, they tend to think like that. But that's important in a life. That I think we should take very, very seriously. That somehow there are things happening that are relatively new in human history that are giving us a new source of meaning. We're finding the meaning of life. This is like the Holy Grail.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I agree. I mean, just the short time that I've been doing these shows and listening to the esoteric ideas, which are things that I kind of insulated myself from. I didn't want to hear about it. I was, but the more and more that I do these shows, I viewed, and I'll be honest with you, I viewed Art Bell's shows as entertainment. It was things that kept me up at night. It was fun. It was, laughable. It was, it was absurd. But now that I'm doing these shows myself and I get to know my guests and I get to actually talk to them and go through some of the exercises and gyrations of their expertise and pick their brains, I have found that, it has changed my life. The way I view things, it's completely opened the way when I view, like, politics is a great example. I said it right at the beginning. I don't care anymore, because I know that there's something else out there that, whatever. I tell people now, just to take care of yourself.
Let me ask you a question about your experience.
Sure.
As you started doing these programs, has it become more meaningful for you even before you had the sighting that you described?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? That's a great time for a break, Dr. Young, because we are coming up on a break. And I will expand on that a little bit more when we get back from the break here in about 4 minutes. So we're talking with Dr. Jonathan Young. If you ever watch History Channel, Ancient Aliens, you'll know exactly who Dr. Young is. Just incredible conversation. I can already tell you this is shaping up to be one of those monumental conversations that we're having. Very knowledgeable, entertaining, and also educational. But hang in there with us. We will be back in a few minutes. Take a quick break. Get yourself some coffee. I know I am. I'm drinking my standard Tim Hortons. Best coffee you'll ever drink. So hang in there. We'll be back in a few minutes here at the Midnight Ocean.
Strange and mysterious though our dreams may seem, it is usually possible to relate them to our past life. But there are some dreams which are not so easily explained. Consider, for example, the dream of Mrs. Wilkie, a dream whose meaning could be unfolded only by the events of the future.
It was on a summer night in the year 1855 that Mrs. Wilkie saw the name in her dream, the odd and unfamiliar name. Her husband, Mr. Frank B. Wilkie, lay sleeping in an adjacent bed.
Frank. Frank, wake up.
Yes? What is it?
Do we know anybody named Edsel, or maybe it was Esdale? Yes, I think that was it.
Good Lord, dear, of course not. What's the matter with you anyway?
Well, I just woke up a few moments ago, and I had that name in my mind. I dreamed about it.
And for that you wake me up?
But it was such a vivid dream, Frank. God, it was so horrible. I was walking...
Don't tell me about it now, please. I want to get back to sleep.
And with that, Mr. Wilkie rolled over on his side and closed his eyes. But on the following morning, when they sat at the breakfast table together, Mr. Wilkie raised his head from the newspaper he was reading and inquired in a curious tone,
What was that name you asked me about last night, dear?
Esdale, or something like that.
Funny thing. There is a man named Esdale. There's a story about him on the first page. He lives in Hyde Park. What was this dream of yours, anyway?
I was walking along the lakeshore, and all of a sudden, I saw a big box lying on the beach. I went up to it, and it was a coffin. And on it there was a name, that name. I could see it just as plainly as I can see you right now.
You're quite sure you never heard of him before?
I'm absolutely sure, Frank. Oh, but I guess I must have read about him in the paper yesterday. That must be the explanation.
It couldn't be, dear. There was no reason for the paper to mention him yesterday. You see, it was just last night that he disappeared from home.
For 4 days after that, no trace of William E. Esdale was found. And now and then, during those days, Mr. and Mrs. Wilkie would glance at each other, and in the eyes of each would be the same troubled expression, the same hint of fear. But on the evening of the 5th day, when Mr. Wilkie returned home from the office, his first words were,
Well, dear, they finally found this chap Esdale.
Oh, Frank, I'm so glad. Ever since I had that silly dream, I've been afraid that... Well, you know.
Yes, I know. But they didn't find him alive, dear. He'd been dead for several days.
Frank, where was his body?
It was lying on the sand down at the lake shore.
It would be easy to argue that Mrs. Wilkie had seen the name Esdale sometime prior to her dream and had forgotten it. But why she should have dreamed of it on the very night the stranger died, and how it was that she saw his coffin in the very spot where his body was later found, these are questions which are not so readily answered. They comprise a mystery to which no key has ever been discovered. A mystery incredible but true.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and podcast. I am your host, Jeff Norton. A little special treat for you guys during the break there. Instead of playing music, we have dug up some old radio shows and kind of like that. I like the music. but I love the old radio. So this week is this month is the month of Movember, not November, but Movember. If you want more information about the month of Movember and why this funny mustache is sitting next to my face, get out to our website at www.themidnightocean.com. Click on the link, but it is about Male Cancer Awareness Month. More information can be found at our website, www.themidnightocean.com. If you're joining us on YouTube, thank you very much. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button. That means a lot to us. We would appreciate that greatly. If you are listening to us on Facebook Live, there's a special message scrolling across the screen just for you. And if you have not already done so on Spreaker, those that are listening on Spreaker, make sure that you like or follow our show. We have an opportunity to be on iHeartRadio, and we need your support in order to get us on iHeart to get the show out to more listeners. But we are definitely growing in our audience, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who take time out of your busy schedule to share the night with us. And tonight we are sharing the airwaves with Dr. Jonathan Young from the History Channel and Ancient Aliens. And Dr. Young, welcome back to the show. Right.
Hello again. I was that old radio was great. It reminded me a little of some old TV shows. One was called One Step Beyond.
Yes.
And another was science fiction theater. They told these uncanny stories. These were before Twilight Zone.
Yep. We have got access to the national. I have petitioned. I have written letters. I have done everything I possibly could, and it finally paid off. We now have access to the national archives of these old radio shows, and what we're doing is we're restoring them. It's amazing how these things come in, and the quality of them is just horrendous. I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to get those to get to the quality. I've had people complain. It's like, well, that's all scratchy. It's like, well, you should have heard what it sounded like before we had it. So it's, but yeah, we're trying to bring that back. I figured that would be better than just sitting and listening to music during a break, and especially those people that get us on podcasts.
Cool.
Yeah. So getting back to your question of me is, yes, I have changed drastically. It is now Sandy, she thinks that it has been, she sees a change. So that says a lot, when someone someone that's known you since a sophomore in high school says, yes, I've seen a change. To me internally, I feel that I've changed tremendously. Things that used to bug me don't bug me anymore. Especially because I've realized that, how do I say this? That we are, instead of trying to change the world, you need to change yourself. Right. And the world around you will change, if that makes sense.
And I don't want to put language on you, but what you're describing sounds like what people used to call a peak experience or a spiritual encounter. This is a transformative moment in a life. And you mentioned that the different witnesses you were with there had slightly different descriptions. I would also predict they have slightly different internal experiences. And these are very important. You can see some evidence right away. But in the trajectory of a life story, a moment like this can be a tipping point. It can be a major event.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does rock it does rock you to the core. It was funny because Brad Olson was on the show and we were talking about UFOs, and Brad was like, well, do you believe in UFOs? And as a pilot, I had an experience where something flew close to me in the clouds in an airplane. I clearly saw, the tail fin. That didn't upset me. It upset me to the sense that I was worried about my safety, because here I am, flying IFR, instrument flight rules, and I got something within 50 feet of me, flying right next to me. And, obviously there's no radar. We didn't see anything. Radar, Chicago. We were actually at that point, we were on Chicago approach over the lake. They didn't see anything. So it was one of those things. Yeah.
I've been up in small private planes, and that's the kind of thing you're really watching for all the time. That's a kind of close encounter that you don't want.
That's right. I mean, and that, but that didn't change my outlook. That just, how do I say it? Just pissed me off, because some knucklehead or something is messing with my life and the passengers, because at that, I was flying the plane and I had people in the airplane with me. So that was more of an anger thing, but that's a UFO experience. I know it wasn't a jet or a military jet, because of at our cruise speed, a jet couldn't cruise that slow. They would stall out. We were in a small civilian craft. So, it wasn't another craft. It could have been, but regardless, that didn't really make me go, wow. It wasn't until the other week, 3 weeks ago, when we saw this thing fly over, I was just flabbergasted. I was gobsmacked, to use that term, because I'm sitting there going, I have no idea what I am looking at. And my mind wants, and I think all minds want to put an image on something. And I had no idea, none whatsoever, what I was looking at.
You can run, but you cannot hide. I want to tell you a very old story from the scriptures that you may have heard in your youth. In the Old Testament, the boy Samuel is sent off for his education. His family has decided he would be a rabbi. His mother has dedicated him to God. So he goes off, and they didn't have seminaries in those days. So he goes to the temple to study as an apprentice, and he's only a boy. And he is the apprentice to the high priest. And he's kind of a helper as well as a student. In the middle of the night, Samuel hears his name, Samuel. So he gets up. The senior priest is rather elderly, so he goes in. And what do you need? And the old rabbi says, why did you wake me up, boy? I'm old. I need my sleep. Oh, well, I heard my name. I didn't call you. Please go back to sleep and leave me alone. And so Samuel goes back to sleep. And a while later, he hears his name. And he goes in and says, what do you need? And again, he has awakened the old rabbi. And the old rabbi, I'm reading a little into the text here, but I'm guessing he's a little annoyed at this point. And he says, I didn't call you. Please leave me alone. Go to bed. And a third time, a while later in the same night, the boy hears his name, Samuel, and he goes in. This time, my guess is the old rabbi is still awake from the last time. At any rate, he has calmed down, and he says in a very kindly voice to the boy, something is happening here. I am not calling you, but you are hearing your name. God is calling you. Go pray. Don't come to me. Go to God. That is where the call is coming from. Well, I've done my best to paraphrase a little story from memory.
Yeah.
We might be talking about this whole conversation, what is that craft that flies by you when you're being a pilot? What is the thing you and your friends witness off in the distance? I think it's less important what the detail is. We tend to make a mistake. We think, oh, it's this because I've heard of it. It must be, maybe it's a UFO because I've heard of UFOs. My guess is it's something we don't understand at all. It is something we probably haven't even speculated about. But we are to take it seriously. We are getting the equivalent of a call from God. And I'm not really talking about theology here. I'm talking about life story. In Joseph Campbell's language, this was the moment of the calling. In the old sense of the word calling, like a priest will receive a vocation. That is, you have a purpose in life. That something beyond your understanding, something mysterious and sacred is saying, I need your attention. There is something you are supposed to do. Please follow the hints and do your best. And we have a hard time with that kind of thing because we're living in a pretty secular time. Angels don't come dropping by and have tasks for us to do. But those old ideas are still strong. And Carl Jung thought the reason that the flying saucers were being sighted is because religion has faded out so much. And we need a new infusion of inspiration and exciting, transcendent possibilities. And they are taking this form. And he was very excited that they tended to be usually described as round in shape. Not always, but so many of them, the majority. And he was a student of the old images from India and other parts of the world that had religious meanings to them. And he thought it was a mandala image, a sacred circle that represented a divine transcendent energy. Now, that kind of language is a little much for us ordinary people to wrap our minds around. What? I'm getting a transcendent message to do something in my life. I mean, it's a little grand, so I don't want to get all, I don't want to get all carried away with it, but on a quiet, little personal level, maybe we're being told to take our lives more seriously.
And it's interesting that you say that because, yeah, I can see that these are epiphany kind of moments for me. And even, even for Sandy and the people that have experienced, yeah, I can see that where it opens us up to, hey, there is life that there are parts of life other than the black and white and the deaths that I'm touching now or whatever. And we need to start opening up our mind and our sight and our vision to those things. And, yeah, I understand where you're going. And yeah, I can say that that's definitely happened in the recent months since I started to do these shows. The things that I see more and more figures out of my periphery than I used to. I see, I go more on my gut. When I say my gut, I ask myself, should I do A or should I do B? And I wait for that answer. That's the part I get most excited about is the effect of this. I mean, the ancients, if we were able to go back a couple thousand years, they all believed in invisible worlds. They had religious language for it, but also in superstitions. They all believed in ghosts. They all had spirit lives, and that was very rich. And here we are, in the 21st century, the product of a great civilization that produces amazing science and technology. And maybe we got a little full of ourselves and thought that all that invisible stuff wasn't important. Well, if you take that world, that whole dimension lightly, it will likely come bite you on the ass. That is, it's going to come. It's not gone just because we don't believe in it, and something will come to get our attention. And I hope it is something positive. I think it, first of all, is likely to take a positive form, a glittering image off of the horizon that we can take seriously or not. If we refuse it, if we neglect it long enough, my guess is it'll start taking a negative form. There's a kind of tenacity to it. It is stubborn. It wants to be honored. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and I'm glad that we had this talk, or that we're talking, because now I can put a kind of an understanding about what the transformation that I'm going through and others that are with me are going through, is because that was always the confusion. I've always had that question is why am I seeing this now versus when I was younger? Or because I was, number one, I can tell you, I always joke with people that there's a reason why I was never really successful in computers. I was successful enough to pay the bills, but I wasn't like Bill Gates successful, because I think the gods know that I probably would have killed myself in an airplane or some other, or some fancy sports car. I joke with Sandy. I'm like, you'd be grateful that I'm a fat man, because if I wasn't, we'd have a Ferrari, a Maserati sitting out there, and I probably would have already wrapped it around a tree and been off this earth. Now I can't fit in them now. So, but yeah, I'm glad that that you kind of shared that with us, because it does put it in a perspective now that I can, in my mind, because, how do you say this? You get headaches thinking about this stuff. Like, why all of a sudden is this happening to me? Why, and what am I supposed to do with it? And now from talking with you, it's a message, and I need to listen to it. And
right. And my guess is where it goes from there will have everything to do with a personal life story. That it will be quite different for each person. But if we take the idea, like the little story of Samuel, if we take the idea seriously, okay, I'm not just called here to do some chore. There is something more profound involved here. I don't just need to figure out this little puzzle. I have the gift of life and my own imagination and my own values. What kind of contribution can I make? What can I do that is even more worthwhile than what I've already done? Clearly, you're already doing this. You have gone to all the trouble to establish this forum, and I have some background in broadcasting. I know what incredible, huge, hard work what you're doing is, and you're providing a service for our time, for your listeners, and you're serving some very important ideas. This is probably even more important than making a boatload of money, although it would be nice to have some of that too.
Yeah. No, it would. I mean, but see, what's really strange is that I've always said if I had that money, I would just grow this show. And that's what's really bizarre. I wouldn't, 10 years ago, I probably would have had the big house and I would have had the Maseratis. But now, if I had an influx of capital or investment, it would be so we can pay, we already have a sitcom deal or a syndication deal already in the works. It would be to pay for that. It would be to up the studio so that we can have a little bit more broadcast quality type of show and stuff. Yeah, it would not be to the grandiose to fit my ego. It would be more towards to grow the show, to get the message out even more so. To me, this is almost a religious experience.
Right. You're on a journey. You have what is called a vocation. This is not just business. This is a meaningful activity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I had this discussion this morning or this afternoon with my mother. She's still alive. Thank God. And, we were talking about that. She's like, I can't believe you're going to give up your successful software business and to do this. And it's like, I don't worry. It's funny because everybody asks how you pay the bills when you do this. Cause you said it's not, you don't make money doing this. As I sit here, Dr. Young, this is a story that as I sit here and I follow the messages that are given to me and I do what I'm supposed to do, I don't worry about getting my bills paid. And they get paid. It's miraculous how they get paid. They get paid. And, it's just weird.
There's all these magical languages for it. But if you're in the groove, if you've got your mojo working, if you're following the path, if you're going through the right portal, all these old shamanic ways of looking at this kind of thing. Let me take a moment and talk about Joseph Campbell and his vision. Yeah. He calls it the hero's journey. It is also called the initiatory adventure or the shamanic quest. But the idea that in a life, maybe not everybody's life, but I think everybody listening to this program will know what I'm talking about. But in a life, you receive a calling. Something gets your attention that there is some place to go or something to do or some question to study. And the people around you might hear it also and not think anything of it. And for some reason, it gets your attention. And that is the path, the beginning of the journey. You are to follow that. And it will lead you across a threshold into mystery, into the place of initiation, literally another geographical location, but more likely another way of thinking, into something that you had not known before. It's not an easy path. Joseph Campbell called it following your bliss, and some people thought that meant party time, but actually it meant doing the most meaningful thing, the most radiant, alive choice you can imagine. And it will be difficult. There will be huge challenges. There will be fear, but lessons will come. Mentors will come. There will be a dark night of the soul when you really doubt what you have been doing, but you can live through that, be the wiser for it. And in the end, there is a sense of fulfillment that you would never get out of an ordinary work. There's a sense of having used your creative gifts well and simultaneously done some good for other people. It's called the sharing of the treasure. But you don't have to cheat yourself. It's not like you're primarily there to do it for others. You primarily do it to fulfill your own story. And as a byproduct, there is a considerable contribution.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely, in life saving, they say first you got to take care of yourself before you try to take care of your patient. And,
yes.
And that's what I'm going through right now. It's kind of like this whole political argument that's going on in politics in the United States. You got to be brain numb if you don't see what's going on. And people are so wrapped up in it. And I just tell them, I'm like, look, forget about the external, work on the internal, be here long enough. Be in the game long enough, take care of yourself so you can sustain and be in the game long enough. And then you'll influence the outside world from there and around. And that's the approach that I'm taking. And I'm telling you, an election cycle such as vitriol as this one is, in my old days would have just tore me up. I would have fed into it. I would have been on every talk radio show. I would have done everything that I used to do in my past. And right there with the rest of them. But, this one, I stepped away and I'm just saying, look, I'm worried about me and getting my center and then working on with Sandy to get her center. I'm letting my children kind of, go through life and experience that, and we're getting ready for them to come back and say, all right, how does this thing work, Dad, that you've been working on? Because we've seen a change in you, and get ready for that. But it's amazing. It is utterly amazing. I did not expect to have this type of conversation with you, Dr. Young. I thought it was going to be more of the black-eyed children and the dog men.
We need to get to that. But in general, these stories, these amazing ghost stories, these sightings, these urban legends, the paranormal events, the crop circles, the little people, all this strange stuff is happening in spades right now. And I have to wonder, why so much? Why now? And it does seem like we're at a great historic turning point, and we're getting messages from beyond. Now, we can debate what beyond means, but it's from something beyond our own immediate understanding that there's clearly more to life, more to reality than we have considered before. There are invisible worlds of one kind or another, and we need to be respectful in the way we seek some answers about that.
Yeah. I mean, well, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot more people become awake. More and more people, and when I say awake, is that, more people are stepping out of that. I'm thinking of that Apple commercial or the Orwellian commercial where everybody is just marching to the dull drums and the athlete comes through and smashes through the window of the guy. And I'm seeing more and more people that I never expected, even in my life. The most cynical people that I've ever met in my life are becoming awake. And maybe we are going through a great awakening, as a people.
I think we are far more free than we realize. People imagine that there are pressures to conform, but I think the pressures to conform are very light, very, very lightweight. That the real problem about conformity is from within, that we are scared to do our own thing. We're scared to think our own thoughts, and so we look around and figure out, what are other people thinking? Oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll keep my head down, and nobody will get mad at me. But actually, we're much more free than that. We could, in fact, be as creative as the athlete in the old Apple commercial that you say, which is a terrific visionary moment. We all need to be that person. And it is tempting to sit down and get in line only because we imagine it is safer. We think we can avoid criticism, but frankly, nobody cares about us. They're really not very interested in criticizing us. The pressure to conform isn't what we fear.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. My grandmother, before she passed once, she goes, if I can give you the greatest advice, it's this. When you're younger, you think everybody or no one sees you. When you get in the middle age, you think that everybody's watching you and you have to conform to a certain way and keep up with the Joneses. And then she goes, when you reach my age, you realize that none of that was true. And that's when you can really have fun and do whatever the heck you want to do. And she didn't use heck. She was a feisty old Irish woman.
Well, let's hear it for Grandma. That's a great little summary.
Yeah, and that was awesome. But with that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Young is joining us on the line. Wow, what a conversation. Yes, we will get to the black-eyed children and the dog men and all of that stuff, but it's interesting conversation as we go through this journey together. But you're listening to the Midnight Ocean radio show and podcast. Stay tuned during the break. We have some very special old-time radio vignettes for you. We're not getting rid of the music. We're still going to play some of the cool music that we play, but we're going to intermix it with some of these vignettes from the yesteryear. This is our form of the Midnight Ocean time travel as we take you back to the year 1945.
There are many baffling accounts in the chronicles of strange events, accounts of men who can read another man's most secret thoughts, who can even foretell the date of his own death. Here is one of those stories. It is the curious tale of an incident in the lives of two great religious leaders.
Emanuel Swedenborg, the founder of the New Jerusalem Church, possessed occult powers, and no better proof of this can be found than in the curious correspondence which he carried on with that other great religious leader, John Wesley, the father of Methodism. It comprised only 3 letters, written within the space of a few short days. The first arrived in London on a morning in February in the year 1772.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Wesley, but there's a letter for you, and it's come all the way from Stockholm.
Well, I know men in many parts of the world, but none whom I can think of in Stockholm. However, there's one there I'd like to know. Swedenborg. I've heard much concerning him lately. Well, this is remarkable. Listen. Sir, I have been informed in the world of the spirits that you have a strong desire to converse with me. I shall be happy to see you if you will favor me with a visit. Emanuel Swedenborg.
Later that same day, John Wesley penned a courteous reply to Emanuel Swedenborg.
Sir, I have for some time hoped that I might make the acquaintance of one whose name is respected throughout all the civilized world. However, since I am at this moment engaged in preparation for a 6-month journey on the continent, I must postpone that pleasure until my return to London.
It was on the day Wesley was to depart from England that the second and last of Emanuel Swedenborg's letters arrived.
Sir, I deeply regret the circumstances which prevent our meeting. But the time that you propose will be, I fear, too late. For I shall go into the world of spirits on the 29th day of next month, never more to return.
Without comment, John Wesley folded this strange message and placed it in his portfolio. It was not until later that the lay preacher brought him news one morning in a little town in Germany.
Dead, you say? Yes, Mr. Wesley. I met a man from Stockholm this morning. Swedenborg died quite unexpectedly about a month ago. It was the 29th day of March.
The body of scientific knowledge has grown enormously since the days of Emanuel Swedenborg. And new facts are discovered and classified each day, but none has yet been revealed which casts any light on the powers of Swedenborg himself. Powers incredible but true.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean. You can listen to us live every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. Wow, what a show. What a show. Oh, for those that are out there that see me and don't think I am a capitalist elitist by wearing the Mercedes hat, I am a huge Nico Rosberg fan. And he could wrap up the championship this weekend in Brazil. If he doesn't do it then, I'm sure that he will take care of Lewis Hamilton in Bahrain. But great race car driver. And I am a huge fan of all things cars and Formula, especially Formula One. I haven't been a NASCAR fan. Haven't watched NASCAR that much. You know, my driver, Jeff Gordon, is no longer driving. I was happy when he came back to fill in for the ailing Earnhardt Jr. But nothing really materialized from that. I don't know. I'm just not, I got into Formula One. NASCAR is a great sport. I love it when they race the actual road courses. Those are fun. But drive fast, turn left, it's no longer entertaining to me and stuff. So I've become a huge Formula One fan. And if I'm not rooting on Nico, I'm rooting on the American team, Haas Automation out of North Carolina. I don't know if you guys know this, but Formula One has been purchased by a United States company. So maybe we will see more of that. But that's enough of that. Enough of those advertising for audio racing. This is the month of Movember. If you are interested to learn more about Movember and why I don't have my goatee and my head is shaved, get out to our website at themidnightocean.com. Click on the link with the mustache on it, and it will take you to a page, and it will tell you all about why we have not shaved, or that why we shaved ourselves on the first day of November and will not shave until the end of November. Some of us probably might want to just stay shaven. I don't know. Sandy tells me no. But that's enough of that. Let's get back to our guest, because we are on a limited amount of time, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk with our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Young of Ancient Alien fame. You're famous for other things other than Ancient Aliens, but I think, Dr. Young, that's where most people see you and have experienced you.
The show is heading into its 10th season. It's over 100 episodes now. It's a big success all around the world. I know the producer. I'm involved. I'm a minor producer myself, and we never expected it to be such a huge thing.
Yeah.
Of course, the work before it, that is, Eric Van Daniken wrote his Chariots of the Gods and the other books before this, which was kind of the starting point. But it's gone into all the different paranormal stories and the various different ghost tales from various cultures and sightings and the tales of a really supernatural dimension that are held by millions of people around the world. So it's gotten to be quite a course in world mythology in addition to the stories about aliens.
Yeah. And it's done so well. How do I say this? Most, shows prior to Ancient Aliens was done in such a way. I mean, they're documentary in nature, and that's okay. But how do I say, the production of them wasn't such. Ancient Aliens is hats off to you guys. The production quality of that is, it's entertaining, it's informative. There's times though where I wish, they would have more of you on. And I'm just saying that because I enjoy it. It's kind of like, here's all of our theories. This is the way I take it when you come on this show. It's like, here's all of our theories and here's all our wacky beliefs or whatever. And then here's Dr. Young to set us straight, kind of thing. And it's like, I wish they'd have a little bit more like Dr. I equate you and like Dr. Michael Heiser kind of at the same level. And Lloyd Auerbach is, you guys come at it from more of a scientific nature or in your case, yours would be a psychological, case, the whole thing about wanting to believe and trying to get it to fit.
We really worked it out together. I mentioned at this big conference that was connected to the program called Alien Con. It was in Silicon Valley, and Giorgio Lewis was there, and David Childress, and the usual suspects from the program. And we work it out because we're on these panels together, and usually one of the David Childress talks about the archaeology, and then like we've just been doing in this conversation, I tend to take off from that and do the kind of personal meaning side of it. And there are a lot of dimensions that this is an important event in human history, and there are many sides to it. They don't cancel each other out. These conversations are not mutually exclusive. I do, of course, think it's important for us to reflect on the personal meanings as well as the technical possibilities of what's happening.
Sure. And, and right before we went off the break, we were talking about the amount of and the types of sightings that people are experiencing these days. It does seem like an uptick. Now, I know that in the 70s, we had a huge uptick in UFO sightings. If you look at all of the reports and going back, I mean, there's a significant amount of sightings in the well, I want to say more descriptive sighting. I don't know if the number, but the types of sightings, mainstream media was out. I remember Leonard Nimoy's series that he did and about UFOs and there was a lot of media attention set on these.
Are you talking about In Search Of?
In Search Of, exactly. Yeah.
There has been, you're right, there are waves. There was a very big wave in the 50s, again in the 70s, and again more recently. And there are times in between when the sightings seem to be more rare. So that's an interesting thing. And they don't go back that far. There were some in the 1890s, and then it was pretty quiet until the late 1940s. And I find that interesting that these things come and go. If we think of it in literal terms, then it would suggest that the visitors lose interest in us from time to time. If we take it in psychological terms, it suggests that there are certain stress points where we need this transcendent visitation. We need a little encouragement. We need a few lessons. So there are different ways to look at it.
Yeah. And, that was the other thing, too, is that and I don't mean to put you on a spot here, but you might know this. Remember the classic book, I'm Okay, You're Okay?
Oh, right, yeah.
When did that come out? Because that was a huge, I remember at the time, when that came out, that was more, that book was getting more into self. And I'm wondering if there was a correlation between that, between that book coming, it was a nationwide bestseller. Everybody had it on their bookshelves. I remember my mother had it on her bookshelf. And
it was approximately 1970. What we had were the social upheavals of the 1960s, and right after that, a number of real breakthrough books came out, and the number of sightings and urban legends and paranormal events also increased greatly, and not at the same time, but right after. And from a psychological point of view, it seems like we were very stressed out about the 60s and needed some guidance right after that.
Sure. And that's an interesting theory. I get it. I see that. I could see where, during these times of upheaval and stuff where we see more and more. And look, even though from a technology standpoint, we're progressing, at a fairly close or fairly fast clip. There's a lot of stress in the world today. I think there's more stress. I mean, I remember growing up in the military, my dad was Air Force, and we were always worried about, the nuclear. We always lived on SAC bases, with the nuclear bombs.
Oh, yeah.
So we were always concerned about, but I can tell you now as an adult, I'm more worried about that today than I was as a child. And
I remember worrying, as a child, I was scared. I was totally frightened of that the Russians, the USSR, was going to drop nuclear weapons on us. We lived near an airport, a major airport, and so the big planes would come over us to land. These were airliners, but I was 6 and 7. I didn't know the difference, and I thought, oh, there it is. Now it is. I had time to duck and cover. was terrifying. So, you didn't actually have to be on a SAC base to be aware of how real that danger was.
Yeah. But, but I think now I'm even more concerned now than I've ever been. But like I said, I'm not, how do I say this? I'm not worried about it because it all goes back to the message that I get is, hey, look, take care of yourself. All this other stuff external to you is external, and don't worry about it. You'll be okay.
I'm an activist, and I'm an involved citizen and things, but I want to keep it in perspective. This too will pass.
Yeah.
It's not all entirely up to me. I don't personally have to save the world. I just have to make my contribution.
That's perfect. And like I said, you got to be around. You got to be in the game, and you got to, have a clear head and stuff to be able to be, to make that contribution. So as a promise, Dr. Young, let's go ahead and switch it up, and let's just get right into some of let's get into some of the main things that are trending this day. What do you think about the clowns? All these clown sightings. What do you think that's about?
That's just fascinating, and I've been several journalists have called to ask me about that. First of all, clowns are pretty bizarre. Little children are divided. Some are charmed by clowns and some are frightened of them. And clowns carry that two-sided nature. In terms of mythology and folklore, they represent what is called the trickster. And there were trickster gods and there were trickster shamans. That is, in ceremonies and such, there would be clown-like priests. That would often there would be a serious priest and a clown priest. The clown would be the trickster or shaman, and he would tell rude jokes and kind of break up the ritual, and he was a comic relief. But he was also the force of chaos. That is, it was important for there to be disorder. After all, a ceremony, a ritual is orderly, and it is supposed to honor the order of the universe and the divine powers and so forth. And the clown trickster shaman would create mayhem and cause trouble. In North Africa, it was, for some reason the word is, it'll come back to me. There's a specific word for it. And the confusion that was caused by the clown shaman is to help us have a breakthrough. But usually it's considered dark. It's considered kind of scary, a little bit funny, but kind of scary. After all, we like to be in control. Mm-hmm. And this is disorder. We have to lose control to have the next growth step. That is our frame of reference. The things we are sure of need to fall apart. And the kind of dangerous, creepy clown, first of all, they're playing with an image that usually is reserved for children's and parties and circuses and happy events. And they're taking a dark side to it, which is a little bit worrisome and spooky. And that is useful to us. That is to, humble us a little and open us up to new messages. Yeah. Oh, I remember the phrase. A moment ago, I couldn't remember a word. In North African shamanistic tradition, it was called mumbo jumbo.
Mumbo jumbo.
And now we use, and mumbo jumbo, we think of it just as silliness or things that can't be understood, but it was a very serious concept at one time. It would be a priestly leader who would talk a kind of nonsense, but there was method to his madness. He was purposely trying to confuse in order to create a kind of shift of consciousness, in order to open somebody up to the spiritual dimension. So the creepy clown is doing something that we can't quite make sense of. We can't control it. It takes us off guard by surprise. It's unpleasant. And it shakes us out of our complacency. It shakes us out of feeling like everything is all settled.
Yeah.
In that sense, I think it's
Yeah, I mean, I guess the concerning part is that you're having this mass. I can understand one or two people. I mean, what from a psychologist point of view or psychological point of view, what would possess? Is it jumping on the bandwagon kind of thing where people want to be part of something? I just don't understand the mindset of individuals, and it's not one or two. We're talking hundreds of people who are dressing up like these clowns and playing out this fantasy, this evil fantasy. of terrorizing people?
Well, I don't know. When I was in high school, there was a certain proportion of the student body that were kind of goth. And they would go and hang out in the cemetery and, dress all in black and be spooky and dressed and everything and get tattoos. And it was their thing. I wasn't in that gang, but I got along with them okay. I was in kind of artsy circles myself, so we were cousins. I think there is a desire to explore the dark side, and within limits, if you don't go too far, it's kind of a useful thing. In Carl Jung's psychology, it was called shadow. And the outer manifestation that is putting on the creepy clown suit or playing the axe murderer in the Halloween, costume evening thing, to go do something that is really kind of creepy, what it is exploring your own creepiness, and we all have our share. It's going to the dark side within.
Yeah.
It's a little unfortunate when they also have the need to scare other people. That's kind of hostile, and it would be better if they would study that a little more and act it out a little less. But I'm not saying it's all bad. Mm-hmm. Being good is not the only answer to life. We also need to own our creepy side.
Yeah. Well, and it is funny that you say that, because if I saw a guy wearing a Halloween, Jason mask, right? Because we grew up, or a Freddy Krueger outfit, I would be leery, but I wouldn't be afraid. But if I hate to say this, and I made it public, if I saw someone having a knife walking down the street with a clown outfit, my desire to defend myself would start at about 100 yards. Someone in a Freddy Krueger mask or a Jason outfit, I probably wouldn't have that desire I wouldn't get to the point to where I'm like, I'm going to defend myself I'd let them get about 50 yards. So, and I think maybe that's the part of myself that I need to examine. Why is one different versus the other?
Well, I don't know if the creepy clowns have hurt very many people, but I bet some of them have been beat up themselves. And I think they're putting themselves at more risk than anybody else.
Well, they've tried to pull, in North Carolina, they said that they tried to pull kids into the woods, and they've chased people and you're absolutely, I'm surprised. Yeah, there are YouTube videos where these clowns, go into the city, but I don't know how much of those are produced, with that intent to do that. But there are some YouTube videos where they go into some inner city areas and try to scare people and just get the bejesus knocked out of them.
Yeah, there's some jerks in the world, and we're just coming off of Halloween here, and the whole idea of putting on a costume. Well, one thing is it gives you an opportunity, gives us all opportunities to be something else for one evening. Yeah. That is, what I find very interesting in a social circle is sometimes it's the quietest friend who comes out as the slutty nun or something like that, who does the most outrageous, kind of provocative costume. And I'm thinking, wow, that quiet secretary is like totally out of hand during the Halloween party. How weird. But it's exploring the other side. And I think actually the person that actually drives a motorcycle, they should dress up as a priest or something. They should go to whatever their other side is.
It's funny that you say that, because I've experienced, I have some really, really Orthodox Jewish friends, and I've been invited to Purim. And these are, for those that don't know, it's a celebration. It happens in Adar, the 14th. And this is there's a whole history behind it, but basically you get the ultra conservative, ultra Orthodox Jewish rabbis getting drunk, acting out, dressing.
And making a lot of noise in the temple. I mean, they really raise hell.
Yeah. It's amazing. And, the history, people, for those that don't know, you need to go out there and just Google Purim, Purim. And it is a celebration of life and the fact that they escaped the executioner. And so it's there is a significance behind it. But like you said, you're absolutely right. I mean, the people, the ultra conservatives, that's when they dress up, you'll see them dressed up as a slutty nurse or the psycho doctor.
In terms of ritual studies, there's always been a need for festivities that have chaos in them.
Yeah.
And there are some where there is a lord of disrule, and that the fool would be up on the throne. He would be the king for the day, and the king would be a servant for a day, where everything is topsy-turvy. And what happens, the social function of these chaotic holidays is to reinforce order. It's a little counterintuitive that having such a messy holiday actually lets us conform and fit in and get our work done and get along with others and kind of be good boys and girls the rest of the year, because we know that once or twice a year we get to be wild.
Yeah. Well, Mardi Gras is a great example.
Good example.
Yeah, Mardi Gras, you get people that are ultra conservative doing things of an adult nature that you would never suspect anybody. Don't. All I got to say is don't go to Mardi Gras, and unless you're prepared to see what you're going to see, because you'll pretty much see everything.
But you'll see everything, and you might see some things in yourself that you never saw before.
Exactly. Well, that's it. You'll participate, and that's the thing, is that you'll start participating, because that whole group mass thing that goes on, that absolutely happens and such. So
shared madness.
Yes, yeah. Share madness. Yeah, it is great. And that actually goes back, there's that movie series that's been somewhat popular where, we'll talk about movies, because I know that you analyze a lot of the cultural movies that are out there and with their meanings. But there's that one movie series where, everybody's peaceful, and then one day of the year you can commit any crime you want to. And,
right.
And that is, it seems like a lot of people are into that. More people. I've heard very rational, reasonable people say, "How cool would that be?" And I'm looking,
right.
I'm looking at them, going, "What are you thinking?"
Yeah, we do a more modified version of it by having Mardi Gras and other sort of wild times. That is without going to the crime level of it. But what those stories and those movies are somewhat important psychologically. They acknowledge that we would want that, or many of us would. That is, we want to act out our hostile side. And I think that is psychologically honest to know I could be interested in doing crimes. Not that I would, but there's a part of me that has some interest in that. When I see somebody that's acted out and done a bad thing, I'm upset about them, and I want to make sure that justice prevails. But it's not like they're from another planet. They're just me who made a few bad decisions.
Yeah.
We are not so unlike the people that are locked up in prison. We just chose not. We indulged it in fantasy instead of actually picking up the knife.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, Dr. Young, we have the holiday, you have Thanksgiving, and I'm sure you've sat around the Thanksgiving table and envisioned someone's head blowing up. I have. I'll just be honest with you. I have. There are family members that I've sat at, and I'm sure my head is in their targets as well.
Any large family that doesn't include at least one thought of murder just isn't paying attention.
That's funny that you say it. So, let's kind of move on, since, we're coming up on a break. So I do want to throw this out there. The significance of movies. We did talk about that with this last, I cannot remember it. And it just goes to show you, I'm not into that kind of stuff. I'm not a horror kind of, I don't like the graphical, horror kind of movies. I just think that they create a form of PTSD within people when you see, there's some images that you just shouldn't see as a human, without it affecting them.
I think that they work for some people. I'd rather not watch it, but I do recognize that there's a reason for their existence, and that we need to be able to look at the hard side, the troubling side of life, if only in a movie. The nice thing about a movie is it's only a movie.
It's only a movie. Yeah, absolutely. So let's do this. We're going to take our quick break. See, that whole segment just jumped right on us and blew right through it. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with our guest, Dr. Jonathan Young, and we'll talk about movies and the significance and what some of the modern space movies, the Star Wars series, the Avatar series, and what the significance of those are when we come back to our guest, Dr. Jonathan Young. You're listening to Midnight Ocean radio show and podcast. Join me here every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Philosophers in their writings, as well as ordinary men in their everyday lives, are accustomed to make a sharp distinction between the animate and the inanimate, between mind and matter. But in the annals of the strange and the incredible, the line of demarcation between the two often grows dim. Witness, for example, the astonishing case of the earth that was consecrated to murder.
It was on the night of July 16th, 1823, that William Wood met his death. He had ventured after dark along the lonely road that ran between Manchester and his native village. And he had not gone more than a mile or so when...
Hold a minute. Well, what is it you want?
I think you know what we want.
If you're referring to my purse, I'm afraid I must disappoint you.
You hear that, men? Well, perhaps we can make him change his mind. Let him have it now.
For all his courage, William Wood was no match for these three ruthless men. In less than a minute, they had pinned his shoulders to the ground and were rifling his pockets of everything they contained.
I'll be able to identify you, every one of you.
Well, in that case, perhaps we'd better make sure you don't. Harry, give me that club you're carrying.
Oh, for God's sake, man. Don't! No!
It was a brutal murder. So violently was the club used that William Wood's skull was forced into the soft ground. And the next day, when his body was found and carried to the Jodrell Arms at Whaley Bridge, the hole remained there. Before the year was out, a legend began to spread throughout that whole section of England. And eventually it reached the ears of Alfred Fryer, a man who had written a book called Wilmslow Graves. When he arrived, accompanied by John Fox, one of the local townsmen, the hole in the earth was still there.
There it is. That's where his head was lying when they found him. Look at any other hole in the ground, and after the first heavy shower, you'll find it all silted up. But not this one. Nothing fills up this hole.
Well, it's true. There's nothing growing in it.
And there never has been. Not since he died there.
The imperturbable Mr. Fryer proceeded to collect a pile of stones from the road and pack them tightly into the hole. And when all traces of the cavity had been removed, he remarked,
Well, it doesn't seem to object too strenuously to being filled.
Just give it time, sir.
All right, we will. Let's go and have a glass of ale. And then we'll come back and see.
It was just an hour later that John Fox and Alfred Fryer returned to the spot.
Good Lord! Look! The sod and the stones. They're scattered all around the embankment.
Again and again he filled the hole. And again, its contents were mysteriously ejected. In setting down the strange story, Alfred Fryer made no effort to explain it. In the eyes of his readers, he would have seemed a fool to have announced that a lifeless, senseless piece of earth could be rendered barren by an act of murder that was perpetrated on it. And yet, how else can one account for this astonishing fact? A fact incredible but true.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That's right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Norton. You know, whenever I hear this song, I think of the Tim Burton movie with the aliens and the little bobby heads coming in and then annihilating everybody. But that's right. You are listening to the Midnight Ocean radio show and a podcast. I am your host, Jeff Norton. You can join me live here every weeknight from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. This is the month of Movember. That's right. A great cause for the cure for male cancer-related research and prevention. For more information, go out to themidnightocean.com. Look for the Movember banner. Click on that. Join the team, Barnacle-Lee's Nerdgasms team, and help raise money for a very worthy cause. Also, if you're joining us on Facebook, we have a special message for you down there. You will get disconnected. I just checked. It is still running, but eventually we will get disconnected. So you'll have to kick over and watch us on YouTube. I don't know why Facebook does it, but who am I to try to figure out Facebook stuff? And if you know why Facebook does it, please let the rest of us know. But when you do get disconnected, just join us here on YouTube. Love to have you. You can also follow us on Spreaker by typing in The Midnight Ocean. That's The Midnight Ocean if you want. One of the things, too, I'd like for you guys to know, we have created iPhone and Android applications, so you can actually download the Android, the TMO Android or iPhone application. It's safe for all Androids and all iPhones. And what's really neat about that application is not only does it show you the live shows that we're doing, but you have the whole archive of all of our old shows as well. A full archive. And so you can download those and take those with you on trips and everything. So I highly recommend you guys start using that. The other thing too is we need your help. We, the Midnight Ocean, when I say we, the Midnight Ocean radio show and podcast, have an opportunity to be listed on iHeart Radio. Now, what is the significance of that? Well, iHeartRadio typically is only for radio stations. That's right. You have to be a licensed radio station to be listed on iHeartRadio. They have opened it up to certain podcasters, and we meet the criteria as a podcaster. So we need your help. One of the things that we need to do is if you are listening to the show right now and you want to help us get our message out to the mainstream. And for those who don't know, our message is about the paranormal and things that non-mainstream topics. We're trying to bring it to the mainstream, but we are not controlled. There is no red phones in my studio. So we are not controlled by our advertisers or by corporate interests. So all topic is open for discussion here on the show. And in order for us to get out to the masses a little bit more, the next step for us is to get on iHeart. And iHeart told us that we need to get our following up on Spreaker. We need they want to see at least 100 people to follow us. That is nothing. When I had my other podcasts and we were talking about doom and gloom and takeover and politics and all of that, I had several thousand followers. Within the first couple of weeks. So there is no reason why we can't have that many followers with this type of show. Come on, people. The world's not all doom and gloom. And talking about doom and gloom, this is a horrible segue. Going back to our guest, Dr. Jonathan Young, joining us. That was a horrible segue. Doom and gloom. And oh, by the way, here's our guest.
Just call me Dr. Doom.
Dr. Doom. No, that's Ed Dames.
Okay.
That's Ed. Ed Dames has gotten that title. But no, going back, we were talking about the significance of movies, and I can't think of two of the biggest ones. Well, one, I can't wait. I'm not one of these people that go the premiere night movies. I never was. But when it comes to Star Wars, I'm there. I'm right there at the front of the line. And, the new Star Wars is coming out here in theaters during the holidays. It came out,
right.
The significant. It's crazy because when these new movies come out, you hear all of the political commentators. It almost seems like, there's agenda even in Hollywood to manipulate people and to make them think. I mean, what do you see going on?
Well, I'm too close to it. You see, George Lucas was working on a space story for years and not getting anywhere with it. And his friends said, have you ever read Joseph Campbell? And he had, but he went and read it again and used Joseph Campbell's model as the backbone of his story. And that is what led to the big success. Since I was working with Joseph Campbell for years and then was the curator of his papers, I met George Lucas and he was on the panel of our Joseph Campbell Archives project. And it's a very important event. The whole series, even the weaker films, I think are teaching important lessons, very significant values. So I couldn't be happier that they're back and that, we had the first one out and, the force has in fact awakened and, we're off to the races because I think these are important events culturally and they're more than movies. And I think the intense fan reaction to them makes all the sense in the world. In fact, I was interviewed for a movie on the Jedi religion, which is the fourth biggest religion in the United Kingdom and has hundreds of thousands of members participating all over the world. And there's some sense that it's a little bit of a parody of religion, but some of the people are actually taking it seriously, suggesting that part of what these new sci-fi stories is giving us is a new religious outlook.
That's it. Well, here in the state of Florida, when I went to go register as a voter, they asked me if I was a Jedi. They have a list of like 20, you have the pirate party, the Jedi party, they have party basically anywhere where you can get enough signatures. So there is a big movement. And what is wrong with the Jedi party? I mean, to be honest, if you think about if you are a classic Star Wars follower, I mean, what is wrong with the Jedi party? That you have this.
They're rather idealistic. They probably cause less trouble than the pirate party, for example.
Yeah.
And of course, now George Lucas, when he introduced the idea of the Force into the story, he was intentionally injecting a spiritual possibility and very carefully and deliberately keeping it undefined so it would mean different things to different people. When I was in my evangelical childhood, we talked a lot about the Holy Spirit and how you could locate this and get aligned with it and get help from it. And it sounds very similar, but I know from Buddhism there's a spark of the divine within, and you go to the different world religions and they all have some version of a presence that is like the Force, an energy that is available 24/7 that you can get some help from, and especially get back on track in terms of the best use of your own life energy. This is like getting back on your path.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because I had a guest on the show not too long ago, and she talked about getting in touch that everybody has a higher being or a higher entity that is up there in the heavens or wherever you want to, put them. And she talked about getting in touch with them and being able to listen to them. And there's a whole series of exercises. And she's a fairly well-known mystic in this regard. And I mean, a lot of people attend her seminars. And I went through her process, and I'll tell you, that's the process that I use now, that when I have a question, I'll ask the question, and whatever answer I get back, and the rule is, this is the rule, is don't ask questions unless you want the honest answer. And you start out very simple, to get your mind trained for this. You start out very simple. It's like, should I drink this cup of coffee? And if the voice comes back and says no, then you don't drink the cup of coffee. Should I have this bagel? No. Can I have this cream? And it's not always no. There's sometimes where it came back yes. And I did that for a whole month. And it's weird because now I ask questions about, the business side of the business, and it works. It really is like, should I invest, or should I start looking at upgrading here's a good example. We have to upgrade our studio by the first of the year in order for our syndication stuff to start kicking in. And it's like, should I take the money that I'm going to receive from projects I've been working on and buy that new audio board? And the answer came back, no.
So on one level, that helps you make decisions.
Yeah.
There's an old word, it's called wisdom, and it helps us get in line and do the best with what we have and reach our better aspirations, because it's easy to fool around in life. It's easy to waste the gift of life. And it's also easy to follow our best path, but there are decision points where we need to decide which choice is the best path, and we can get some help. Now, you could speculate that that's just our own best, deepest inner smarts, or perhaps, for example, people that have addiction problems go to 12-step programs, and one of the steps, giving ourselves up to the higher power. And they very intentionally leave the whole possibility of what higher power means up to the particular person, because, for a Buddhist, it'll mean very different from what it might mean to an Orthodox Jewish person or a person that's been entirely secular their whole life. The notion is we have something available to us that is smarter than our everyday operating system, smarter than what we know. We know more than we know that we know. And part of the challenge then is to get out of our own way and open up to it. And the poetry of the Force is just fine, because it's kind of a well-made movie. And we think about the most recent movie, and you've got a long time has passed, and the Force has not been strong, and the Jedi Order has been wiped out, and the evil guys are back, and they're running things. So you have this opening situation where there's a kind of drought. There's a sort of wasteland. We're out in the desert. We're lost in the forest. We're in the moors. It's that kind of terrible start to a story. And that's a good story, because a story that starts in a terrible place is likely going to get better. And we need to find Luke. That is, we need to find the last Jedi. We need to find our way back to our guiding truth. That's the symbolism in the story. And the big object in play throughout the movie is a piece of a map. It's not even the whole map. They have a piece of the map, but it's precious, because if you can ever find that and fit it into the rest like a jigsaw puzzle, then you could really know where you're going. That's usually how it is for individuals. We're on the journey. We're in our life story. We're trying the best we can. We have part of a map. We might know what the next 2 or 3 steps are, but after that, like you say, you want to make God laugh, show him your plans, because the rest of it's guesswork. We need to be very receptive to the Force or the inner wisdom or the guidance from above, wherever, something larger than ourselves. It calls for great humility. And one thing about the story is all of the characters, like Poe and Rey, Finn, they're all weak. That is, Poe can fly a fighter and stuff, but they don't have armies behind them. They don't have supernatural powers. They're not superhuman. They are ordinary people with rather little to play with, and they're up against awesome odds, unbelievable, overwhelming enemies, and yet, because they're in the service of something larger than themselves, because they're very earnest about what they do and very focused, they survive.
Yeah. Well, I equate that to being just. It's kind of like, well, let's look at our modern history. You only had 3% of Americans who opposed the King of England. And, and from that 3% rose the revolution and our freedoms that we have today. Vast majority, a lot of people think of America was this huge colony of people who opposed the king. And no, it was only a very small majority. And look at the uprisings that you had over in the Middle East. And, if you look at total populace, it's only a very small group of people and very common people. These weren't, super politicians or anything like that. They became the politicians after the fact, but these were tradesmen, these were drunkards, these were, if you look at history, Adams and stuff, these were just run of the mill lawyers. Nothing.
One way to look at our own personal revolutionary history is to see how the story of my life journey fits into the bigger picture, the march of history, the needs of the community, the will of the Holy Spirit, whatever larger stories are going on, and make our contribution, because if we join together in a good cause, we might just change everything.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk, a gentleman like Dr. Martin Luther King, or someone like that. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think, and I'm not going to get into the politics on the show, but I'm trying to draw a correlation. You still have these people on a pillar. How powerful would it be if you had a mechanic, someone who has a high school education, who's a mechanic, who's actually very well spoken, that went through the journey of life, rise up or ascend to a power of a president of the United States? Can you imagine what that would be like? That'd be an incredible story. Someone that was on a salt of the earth kind of person, rising and doing that. Wow.
And only a few of us are called to political office, which is a very important job in life. I've never been particularly interested in it. There are so many other things that need to be done, but one thing is crucial in this part of the story is self-understanding. We need to get a good sense of what jobs we might be able to do. There are many needs out there, but they don't all fit me. There are certain things I might be able to, certain things you're obviously good at broadcasting. You need to know what you're good at, and then the next question is, okay, given that I can do this pretty well, how could I use it wisely? Yeah. And I don't want to spend any time saying, well, gee, I'd kind of like to be a rock star. Well, the little problem is I really don't play guitar very well, and my voice isn't that great. So I don't want to pay too much attention to the stuff that's obviously not my story. I want to pay attention to the few things that I could do well, and then use those gifts very, very carefully.
Wow. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, that's, and I think I found, writing software and everything propelled me or got me to this point to where I can do this. But my calling is exactly what I'm doing right now. And that's bringing, subject matter like this. My goal is to bring non-mainstream subjects to the mainstream, to the mass populace, and say, hey, look, there's a whole nother world. You guys are living in a matrix. And there's a whole nother world, and we would love for you to come and join us. We would love for you to be part of this world with us.
Just think of people in the audience. Some people are just born teachers. Yeah. Some people are really good at throwing parties. Well, every good cause needs gathering and needs somebody that knows how to put a gathering on. So self-study, to be really aware of what we bring to the event, what we bring to history, what we might be able to give. Oh, by the way, in the movie The Force Awakens, one of the best characters, of course, is played by Harrison Ford, and Han Solo comes in always so reluctant. He doesn't want to be heroic. He always ends up being heroic. And I love that aspect of his character, because we don't always want to do the hard thing. We don't always want to do the best thing. But, if we listen to our inner angels, we'll probably rise to the occasion just like he does and save the day.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. I mean, look at Alvin C. York, the story behind him. And then you have the new one that's coming out with the war movie where the guy's a pacifist, and come to find out he saved, hundreds of soldiers. And
right. His drill sergeant thought if he didn't pick up a weapon, he was a coward and was going to be of no use. Well, he was of more use than any of the other guys that did pick up weapons, which is to be really violently, radically honest with ourselves and true to ourselves. And that is not easy, because you will get some hassle from other people. But that isn't the hardest part. In real life, the hardest part is the hassle we give ourselves, because we're not fitting in the way that looks cool and everything. We're doing our quirky thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Another movie I want to talk about, I mentioned it in our emails before we did the program. There is a sci-fi movie coming out called Arrival.
Yes.
There have been a few TV commercials on it on YouTube, a few previews and things like this. It's from a book. I couldn't get myself into a sneak preview. I really wanted to see this one early before our show here so that I could talk about it. I did read the book, and it's about a visitation. So there's all these motherships and stuff. It's it's spectacular, big scale visitation, not just one saucer or something, but it's all over the planet. And The problem is, and the military get into it because they're always worried that it's dangerous, and usually it turns out to not be dangerous unless the military muck it up and they could make it dangerous. But there's no sign that it really has to be a threat to us, but they can't understand each other. And they go to the world's greatest linguist, at least she's a very good linguist at an important university, played by Amy Adams. And they say, listen to this recording, and the recording sounds like something flapping or something, like somebody buzzing with their lips. It doesn't sound like words. We think it's language. We think these visitors are trying to communicate. Of course, they look nothing like us. They don't walk on 2 feet or anything like that. And the story represents how, if we really did have a large-scale visitation, how difficult the communication would be. In some big sci-fi movies, they cheat. They solve the problem by having them figure out English because they're so advanced. Of course, they can figure it out. But frankly, no. If this ever happened, they wouldn't have figured out English. They'd arrive speaking whatever they speak, and then we'd have to somehow work out the translation. So most of the movie is about working out the translation, not knowing whether or not we're in danger, and having enough faith in the possibility that it could be for the best. And of course, it represents the problem of communication between any creatures. I mean, two human beings, or human beings and animals, or human beings and nature, or human beings and space. The problem of communication, and it's just mind-bogglingly difficult. And in the story, she gradually breaks the code. I'm just thinking of marriage, how difficult it is to communicate with one other person that you are in love with. I mean, if that's so hard, it's going to be cosmically hard to communicate with visitors from beyond.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had Stanton Friedman on the show last week, and I'm going to have Seth from SETI on the show. He's coming on, and that was one of the things. You're absolutely right with the SETI. Here they are beaming out these very simplistic radio frequencies and expecting highly advanced individuals to listen to them. To them, it's probably just bug chatter. Like you said.
There's a couple of very old movies that are really cool on this point. There was Contact with Jodie Foster in 1971, based on a Carl Sagan novel, and he was a real scientist from Cornell University, so he was trying to get the science right in the book. And she is doing the SETI kind of thing. She's doing the radio transmitting, and they do have connection. And then the way they wrapped it up, they had you might remember, a few of the people in your audience might not have seen this, so I won't totally spoil the ending, but they had Contact, and they managed to get it into English, so I think they kind of skipped a little on that part of the story.
Yeah, fudged it. And there was you talk about that. I mean, there was a crop circle that actually came back in England not too long ago, where we set out kind of like a petroglyph out in the space, an imagery with a DNA molecule. It was a binary petroglyph. So it was based on bio. Yeah, and it came back. There was a crop circle that came back, and it was in the same format of the petroglyph, but the binary was a little bit different when they got to the DNA. So it's kind of like they responded back to us from the binary side, and they said that, here, we're the same as you, but our DNA is a little bit different. And it was just amazing. I tweeted about it, and I have to pull that back up, but it was just an amazing, even if it was it was amazing because whoever, hoaxed it had the DNA right. And so it was because they had.
What we're going to need is an incredible decoder ring, and not only for the paranormal things that we might want to figure out, but figuring out our own life story. What you have when you go back to folklore, or if you study your own favorite story as if it's a dream, is mostly images, and they are potentially symbolic, and they can provide guidance if we can decode them. This is on a very personal level. So I think that's one of the opportunities in these important sci-fi movies. Hey, we're 2 hours in. I haven't mentioned my website yet. I just want to tell people that folkstory.com is where a lot of my articles, parts of my books I've posted, links to things like this, discussions of movies as psychological maps and things like that. So folkstory.com is worth a quick look.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have links to those on your author page on our website. And Dr. Young, believe it or not, we blew through another segment. Can you go another segment? Are you good? I've got plenty of questions for you.
I'm with you.
All right. So awesome. So there you go. And if you guys would like to ask a question of Dr. Young, Jonathan Young, get over into the chat room, either on Spreaker. Go to Spreaker.com, type in The Midnight Ocean there, and join us in the chat room there. Or on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and type in The Midnight Ocean there as well, you can join us in the chat room. If you have a Google Plus account, of course, you can send those chats over, and we'll be more than willing to ask those questions. We're going to return here for another segment. Right now, though, we're going to play some more vignettes from Old Time Radio.
The thing happened on an autumn afternoon in the city of Norfolk, Virginia. And to try to explain it, you must know also of the incident that occurred on that same afternoon in another city more than 3,000 miles away. But in all the years that have passed since that particular afternoon, no one, neither scientist nor spiritualist, pretends to understand it.
It was in a movie house that the thing happened, in the Lowe's State Theater in Norfolk. And the day was September 15th, 1930. The talkies were little more than a toy then. Travelogues had been made, and Vitaphone shorts, of course, but the day of full-length features had only just dawned. Hence, as the feature began, the audience leaned forward in their seats with eager anticipation. And on the screen flashed the name of the film and the credits. The Sea Wolf, adapted from the novel by Jack London, starring Milton Sills. Up in their box at the rear of the theater, the operator and George, his assistant, sat side by side, their eyes on the screen below, anticipating an hour or so of pure enjoyment, their ears tuned to the smooth, familiar, automatic click of the projector. But they were doomed to disappointment, for something unforeseen was taking place.
It's a soundtrack, George. Something must be wrong with it.
No, neither words nor music were audible in the theater. Already the audience was beginning to express its annoyance. The operator and his assistant worked feverishly over the sound unit, examined every possible source of trouble. And after 5 minutes, the operator shook his head in perplexity.
I can't find it, George. I give up. Let's hold out the emergency unit.
So they flashed a placard on the screen requesting the audience to be patient. And then they connected the emergency sound unit and started the film from the beginning. Once again, the spectators grew quiet. But within an instant, both men were on their feet.
George, there's still no sound. The emergency unit doesn't work either.
3.5 hours later, the two men were still bent over the sound equipment. The patrons had long since filed out of the theater. And if they had not finally given up hope, the operator and his assistant might still be there. For neither they nor anyone else was ever able to determine the mechanical cause of the trouble. And then, on the following afternoon, when the men went back on duty, both were wondering whether the cause was mechanical, for both had seen the morning papers.
You read about it then, huh, George? It couldn't have had anything to do with that soundtrack, could it? But if it didn't, it's the craziest coincidence I ever heard of. 2 sound units go on the blink for no reason at all. And at the same time, on the same afternoon, Milton Sills, the star of the movie, dies.
Yes, on the afternoon of September 15th, 1930, the career of the illustrious Milton Sills came to an end. As the audience in a theater in Norfolk, Virginia walked away, bitterly disappointed because they had failed to hear the star's voice, the star himself lay on his deathbed in Hollywood, California. Hard as it may be to believe that there could be a real connection between the two events, it is still harder to believe that it was mere coincidence. Whatever the explanation, the fact remains that the incidents did occur simultaneously, and that in itself is a fact. Incredible, but true.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
In cases of accidental death, the greatest tragedy always lies in the fact that the disaster might have been.
stranger. This is the Midnight Ocean radio show and podcast. I am your host, your captain of entertainment tonight, Jeff Norton. You can join us here live every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. If you're watching us on YouTube for the very first time, we would appreciate if you hit that submit button. That would be subscribe, I should say. That would be most kind of you. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, I will tell you, I will warn you, give you the heads up that you will be disconnected. And when you are, the only way that you can catch back up with the show is either go to Spreaker.com, type in the Midnight Ocean, or join us over here at YouTube. Since I mentioned YouTube, we are talking with our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Young. If you are on YouTube or on Spreaker, go ahead and ask your questions now, and we'll make sure that those get over Dr. Young before he leaves us for the evening. This is the month of Movember. For more information about Movember and what we're doing and why I have shaved my goatee and my head and everything, go out there to themidnightocean.com. You will see the banner, Movember banner, in the right-hand side if you're browsing it through a web browser. If you're browsing it on your iPhone or any device like that, just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see it. Click on it for more information as we try to raise money for cancer, male cancer prevention and research. It's a big project, trying to raise a lot of money. And if you ever been affected, if you've had a family member, grandfather, father, son, even yourself affected by testicular or prostate cancer, you know it's a devastating disease. And so our way of helping is by supporting the month of Movember. Getting back to our guest, I don't want to keep him on the line or on hold too long, is Dr. Jonathan Young PhD, well known for his Ancient Alien series on History Channel, but we kind of, I don't want to say steered away from that. Getting into some topics that are very interesting, Dr. Young. I have to tell you, I'm just fascinated. I said it early on, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that we've kind of thrown that out the door. I mean, we're talking about things that I never envisioned us talking about, which is awesome, because this is a side that intrigues me anyways, more so than some of the other topics that I originally picked out.
Your listeners probably know that anything can happen on this program.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I keep it conversational. I'm not really one to, how do I say, to do a hardline interview. Here's the question. Here's this. Here's that. Because I feel that more, I had Leo Agami on the show. I've had Brad Olson on the show. And they all say the same thing. It's like, Jeff, just in the conversation, you got us to talk about things that we haven't talked about before ever on anybody's show, just because of the nature of the conversation and how it leads and stuff. We were talking about movies, and I'm going to throw this question out there. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg argument. Do you feel, and has there been a noticeable shift in this, but do you feel that life follows art, or is art following life, especially in movies?
Well, my main interest is in science fiction, so it's interesting to see what kind of themes evolve and how much information is carried. There are some people in the UFO circle that think that the best reports about what's really happening are coming by way of movies. They believe that there is a certain suppression of information, and so it has to be surreptitious. We have to sneak out the reports. I do think philosophically, psychologically, spiritually, sometimes science fiction movies are able to get at some big questions. Now, not the big ones that are all warfare from the beginning to the end, but like the one I was just talking about, Arrival, or the Star Wars films, or Avatar, some of these very thoughtful stories get at profound challenges that we face both collectively and personally. So I think in that sense, life follows art. But of course it is circular. because art is also going to report not only history, not only the facts that are in the newspapers and are on the radio and so forth, but the things we haven't quite said yet. And my mentor, Joseph Campbell, said that if you want to know the future, pay close attention to the artists. He thought that they were our best mystics. That is, they are able to tune into the unseen. And sometimes the unseen is the future. It's the slight changes that some people will pick up long before the community at large. Just the way a cat or a dog will know that an earthquake is coming. It's not magic. It's not mysticism. It's that there are some very subtle vibrations that come before the big ones, and we're too busy. We don't notice them. But a small animal on 4 legs down near the ground, they pick that up. So there are some among us, and I think sometimes it's the writers of sci-fi stories and the filmmakers that are tuning in to things that we need to know and making movies about them.
You know, one of the things that, and maybe this is just my perception, but I want to get your opinion on it. One of the underlying threads that I'm seeing in a lot of movies that are especially generated today is this concept of federation or, group versus nationalism. America is, how do I say, New World? I don't want to use the word New World Order because that's such a negative term. But this sense of collaboration amongst world entities or planetal entities versus a race or a group or a nationalism. Did I frame that question correctly?
I'm not quite following you. You're talking about like a UFO movie?
Well, no, just movies in general. You're seeing it and I want to say, America is American, and we have a nationalism bent. We're kind of bent on nationalism here. We believe, only America. And then you have the rest of the world. And a lot of the movies that I'm seeing coming out are talking about like a one world kind of entity, a UN kind of entity versus you're not normal if you believe in nationalism. That's kind of like the enemy of everything is nationalism.
Yeah, I don't know if I do much with this, but I do have a little thing I like to say, which is I live in the United States of America. That is the best country. The reason that is the best country is because it is my country. I went to a certain high school. That is the best high school. The reason is because I went there. And I have a pet, and that is the best pet on the whole planet because it's my pet. Oh, and I have a God, and that is the best God because it is my God. And that's the logic of nationalism, and I don't find any problem with that. It used to be called boosterism. It's just enthusiasm for what we know. Of course, there are other good gods and there are other good countries, and maybe there are other good high schools. I'm not really sure about that one. But I know there are no other good pets. Mine are definitely the world's best pets.
Okay. Well said. I mean, actually, well said, Dr. Yo. That's why you're a doctor and I'm just a host of a radio show. No, and that's what I was getting to is there anything wrong with that belief system? And so, because, I mean, I'm my football team, my Cubbies, go Cubbies, won last night. Best. Yeah. So
unless you're from Cleveland, they're the best.
Yeah. Well, I know people, what's really funny. I know people from Cleveland and they said that if they were to get beat by a team, they're happy that it's the Cubs, that they were beat by the Cubs.
After a century, you finally get a turn. You finally get a break.
Yeah. The problem is that I'm getting ready for Armageddon because I, said that Cubs would, I'm waiting for, hell's going to freeze over. So apparently this winter's going to be pretty brutal.
My teacher, Joseph Campbell, called the local gods the tribal belief system, that it is important to belong to your tribe and be loyal to your tribe and have the company and support and emotional meaning of being in the tribe, but not to think that our tribe is the only one. There are also not only all the other tribes, and they have some very interesting stories too, but then whatever the divine mysteries are, if there's a God, if there's a meaning to life, this is going to be larger than any one tribe. We're more in it together than not.
Sure.
And we need one reason to do cross-cultural studies, one reason to travel to other countries, or at least go to parts of town where you don't live, or go down to the village, or go visit the Indian reservation, even if it's a couple of days trip or something. Reason to get into another tribe, at least as a visitor, is to see that it's not just a different set of stories. It's not just a different language. They're living in a different reality. That reality is more flexible than we thought. It is not one given thing. There's always a lot of ways to look at something.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, one of my favorite shows, one of the shows that we do watch online here is like Anthony Bourdain. We love how the fact that he goes to different cultures and he uses food as kind of like the interlocking pin to the topic. And it's amazing, though. Yeah. We all eat. I don't know if you know Henry Rollins. He's a rock guy who does some writing. Anyway, he says that one of the biggest eye openers is going to be travel. You get in some other culture, like Bourdain does. Get inside of it, and you'll learn things about the world. You'll learn things about life, and you'll learn things about yourself. Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. And I've been fortunate enough to travel to other countries and experience other cultures, and it is amazing. I highly recommend it. You know, all these people that spend all these money on cars and stuff, I did it through work. I would have never been able to do it in other means, but, instead of buying, trust me, you're going to get more life experience. I mean, there's nothing, like driving a car 150 miles an hour down the highway. But I'll tell you, you're going to get the same experience by going and visiting another culture and learning about. And if you can't,
then watch Bourdain's show or pick up a book. That is to get really curious about things that are different than we are, and assume that they're just as good as we are. I'm not going to say better. I'm not sure that the religions of India are better than the ones I grew up in, but they're very different. Yeah. I actually went in as a child. I was 13 years old, and I came back to my very conservative Sunday school teacher, and I said, what about the Hindus? They're really interesting. They have these really fascinating temples and things. It was not what the Sunday school wanted to hear. He wanted to hear the same Bible story. And I kept persisting because I was really excited about it. And he finally said, we're praying for those folks. They're all lost souls. We have to witness to them and send missionaries. And I said, are you sure? Because they're pretty cool. They've got these really good stories, and they've, and he said, Jonathan, you've got to take this on faith. Well, I've been around church circles long enough to know what that phrase meant. Yeah. That phrase means shut up, kid. And so I did, but there was no curiosity. I think there's a little more interfaith dialogue now. I think things have changed a little. At least in some circles. But the point is to find the curiosity in ourselves and read a little bit about Buddhism and Hinduism. They've got some pretty good stuff going for them.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you said, and that's why I love, like, a city like Chicago. You don't have to travel out of the country. You can go to Chicago. You can go to New York. Chicago, you go to Armitage Avenue in Chicago, which is on the north side towards Evanston, and you start at the lake, at Lake Michigan there off of Lakeshore Drive, and you work your way westward, and you will go. We used to joke about it, and I had a lot of friends that were Muslim and Jewish and Orthodox Jewish, but you start at the lake and you start out it's kind of like Little Koreatown, and then you move a little bit further, and then now you're in Pakistani. It's all on the same stretch of road. So now you're in the Pakistani community. Then you're in the Saudi Arabia community. Then you're in the hardcore Jewish Orthodox community. And all of the restaurants, you want to talk about just the melting pot of food, is right there. I mean, you get the whole gamut. We used to spend nights just walking Armitage, and we would start out doing cooking our meat or whatever over like an open fire. And then we'd end up eating shish kebabs, and then we would have baklava and stuff like that from the Jewish bakeries at the end of Armitage. And it was about a 5-mile stretch, and you just start at one end and you just work your way through it. And that was, so yeah, you don't even have to go to other worlds or other city or other countries. You can go to Chicago, or you can go to New York and just ask where Little Italy is. And then, of course, you downtown, you got Greektown, you got You go to Chinatown and then you get all the Asian cuisine. You know, if you like eating fish as it's staring at you, you can do that. You can experience that.
It costs you a lot less expensive. You know that there's this old saying, if God had meant us to fly, he would have given us tickets.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Some of the questions I just want to, John, and he has a couple questions in the chat room, Doctor, I want to ask you. And now ideas we just tend to express ourselves or live it out passively through violent movies and violent video games. Yeah. So, you know, we talked about that. Maybe, you know, our primal, our reptilian brain, you know, the one that, you know, wants to destroy and devour in order to survive. I mean, do you think like the violent movies, the violent video games are, that those movies kind of tend to subdue that passion within ourselves, our reptilian brains?
I don't really enjoy them myself. Maybe my reptilian brain already gets enough turns without having to watch these things. They're rather simple. One thing I don't like about them is they're very black and white thinking. They're junior high level philosophy where there's good guys and bad guys and they have to blow each other up. In real life, we're all a little bit good and a little bit bad, and the war is mostly inside one person, each person. And so I think that they're very limited in what they are saying. That said, there are fantastic movies out there, and some of them do have rough parts that people get hurt, but they're not violent from beginning to end, and they are profound. We are in a golden age of storytelling, some of the best movies ever made. It's an economic thing. It has to do with the internet, so many channels, and the cable television. Because of all of that, there are really fantastic stories around, far more than one has time to watch. Yeah. So I don't pay much attention to the video games I don't like or the movies that are too violent because there's so many to choose from.
See, and what I like, you know, and this kind of leads into the Avatar movie, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But what I like about old time radio is we did a series, we played some last night, and on Halloween, is that you get the story without all the gore, and then you can kind of fill in the gore, you know, as you see fit, as your mind will allow you. And I think it's it's a way of getting that story across, and in such a way that it is not offensive. Because look, I don't care what people say. There are some images, and I've seen real life tragedy and horror and stuff in my travels. There are just some images that the human mind you're not really supposed to see. It does stay with you. It does trouble you. It does affect you. And I think that with a lot of these graphics, I mean, we're hearing about these young soldiers that are going into combat that have, you know, video game experience, and to them killing is a game. I watched a documentary on these soldiers in Afghanistan, and those guys were, you know, I don't know if it's the fog of war, and I'm not here to criticize them because I'm not in their shoes, but it was scary. It was concerning, not scary, concerning that these people were finding pleasure out of killing.
That happens in every war, and if you go back to the long literary accounts of the Civil War, the Crimean War, the First World War, and war is a terrible thing, and an awful part of our human nature comes out during the war, a genuine love of killing and hurting other people. That is part of us. It's a very unfortunate, sad, tragic part of us, and we need to be aware of it, if only to keep a lid on it, if only to be honest with ourselves that it's there. I don't know that it is any more stirred up by video games than in the past, because the wars of the past were even more brutal than the ones we have now. This is part of humanity that we have to face. Back to your comment about radio, I do agree that the very best visual special effects of all time are done in radio drama without any CGI or anything, just in the human imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Because I can make that character me. I can make, that's what intrigues me about the old time radio. And that's why I believe, how do I say this? So much is lost, and you're probably going to criticize me. I don't know. You probably won't. But I feel so much is lost in movies and TV and stuff. I mean, because everything's laid out for you. The director
maybe.
controls what you
I
see.
know, you're talking to a fan. There's something when you go to a play or go to a movie, there's something called the willing suspension of disbelief, which is a long way of saying you really get into it. And I'm cheap. If I pay my $10 and I go in there, it is very rare that I am not in the reality of the movie, totally immersed in it. It is real to me for the next 2 hours, and I come out thrilled for having been on the adventure. So I'm an easy, participant. I just go along with it. This is why I choose movies pretty carefully, because if there's too much blood on the floor, then I'm going to be part of that for 2 hours. So I want to choose what ride I go on.
Yeah. Well, there are video games that are very much like that. If you want to command a starship, and there's a game that I love playing. It's called Eve, and of course there's battles in it and stuff, but it is a very technical, and you command a starship. You can spend I know you said you're not a video game person, but you can spend hours upon hours flying your starship through galaxies. It's incredible. And, of course you do have battles, but it's not the gore. It's not in your face gore.
I like the fact that it can take us into other worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. And, talking about taking other worlds, another movie, that you mentioned in is Avatar. And I know Avatar's coming out with another installation here soon. And
it's been pushed back. It was going to be soon, and now it's apparently not going to be until 2018. It was going to be next year, but Cameron goes to such enormous lengths to get those stunning visuals that it just takes him a long, long time.
Yeah.
But the first story was fantastic. I mean, not that the acting was all terrific, but the visual effects were absolutely stunning.
Oh, yeah.
And here's this guy in a wheelchair. We're all kind of identifying with Jake. Although his boss, I can't remember her it was Sigourney Weaver. She's in there too. Grace, I think her name is. Anyway, here we have this other planet. So we're going off to a faraway place. They have to go into cryo sleep to get there, and all of this business of dealing with the distance. And they have this mission. He's got a difficult commander. So here is a great challenge in life, and the central character that we are set up to follow is broken. He's handicapped. He's injured. Well, we're all broken, not necessarily to the level that we can't walk physically, but our hearts have been broken. We have our wounds, if you've had any experience in life at all. And the story offers the potential. Apparently there's some operation that could correct his legs, and he could walk again, but he can't nearly afford it. So this is like being poor of spirit. We can't really pull our lives together. But maybe if we rise to this challenge, and we have to go in another form, and this is almost like Halloween, we're going to look different. And they get him into a Navi body, and this is how he's going to look when he gets there. And that body can walk. People in wheelchairs often dream of running and doing all the things they can't do. So we have parallel realities, and in some of them, we're not as broken. Yeah. And the trick is, how can we use all of the parts of our reality to be more complete? But first, he has got to deal with this kick-ass boss. He's, got scars on his face, and he represents the tough guy. And I don't only mean the tough guy in the world, but the tough guy in ourselves, very defended, very militaristic, very suspicious, very warlike, ready to pick a fight all the time. We all have that. It's not a very pretty part of ourselves, and it's not a very necessary part of ourselves. It's been wildly oversold. So we finally get off into this magical other world, very dreamlike place. Pandora is like something out of a dream. And we start making mistakes. That is, he gets all enthusiastic about having this new body and being this magical place, and he wanders off. And he ends up meeting a Navi female, and she says, "You're stupid. You're like a little baby." And he is. He's a warrior. He's big and strong in his Navi body, but he doesn't know very much. And she doesn't want anything to do with him at first. And finally, she can kind of see that he's got a good heart. Actually, the plants can kind of tap into him, and they're these little spirit-like creatures. They guide her to accept him. She doesn't want to. This is like listening to the Force, or listening to the Holy Spirit, listening to our inner angel or something. There's a part of us that knows more, and so he has a guide. He not only has a romantic partner, but a guy.
Dr. Young, I'm going to have to stop you right there. I hate to say it. We are blowing through these segments. We'll take this break. We'll come back. And yeah, I want to hear this the Avatar. I think it's very, I'm hearing something that I've never really, when I watched the movie, I never really got. I thought it was more of a corporate battle, greed, man against nature and the destruction of civilizations. But as we talk with our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Young, as he breaks down the Avatar for us.
One of the most baffling of all scientific phenomena is the phenomenon known as stigmatization. And in spite of our inability to explain it, that it has occurred even in contemporary times can hardly be disputed.
More than 7 centuries have passed since St. Francis of Assisi, known during his lifetime merely as Brother Francis, went into the Apennine Mountains and with his disciples climbed Mount Alberno. There in a rude cell he fasted and prayed for 40 days and nights. The 40th day was September 14th, 1224, and it was the day the vision came to him, the vision of a winged seraph nailed to a cross. He invited his disciples into a cell to witness it, and one of them, looking down at him, cried,
This is no vision, Brother Francis. This is no dream. This is a miracle of God.
725 years is a long time. It is sufficient time for facts to be twisted and for legends to grow. But there is the written word of Pope Alexander IV that he saw evidence of the miracle with his own eyes. There is the testimony of those later men and women who underwent the same mystical experience. Benedict Arezzo of Bologna, and John Gray and Nicholas of Ravenna, and Anna Katharina Emmerich, the peasant girl of Munster. And if anyone still remains skeptical, then we must refer him to the newspapers of July 10th, 1922. For the miracle of St. Francis is not confined to the misty past. It happened again to an ordinary young girl named Mary Riley in the ordinary American town of Peekskill, New York. There, at the home of the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, Mary Riley awoke from a deep sleep and, feeling a sharp pain in her side, glanced down.
Mother, it has happened to me. It was there when I awoke, Mother. I had a strange dream, and then my side hurt me, and that awakened me. And it was there. A cross of blood. Yes. Just like St. Francis, isn't it, Mother?
The wounds of Christ appeared on him. I knew it is a cross of blood. But there can be no question it is the same thing. The same miracle of God.
This is the phenomenon of stigmatization, the appearance on the body of wounds, either in the form of a cross or in the pattern of Christ's own wounds. Sometimes it has occurred during a cataleptic condition, sometimes only during a heavy sleep. But that it has occurred cannot be doubted, nor has its cause ever been satisfactorily explained. As far as our knowledge goes, it remains what it was in the days of St. Francis. A miracle. A miracle incredible but true.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Norton, as we cruise on into the evening with our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Young. I'm trying to match the beat there. Don't know if I'm doing good. So I'm trying to take it easy, as I know it's late in the evening, and I appreciate Dr. Young staying with us as we rejoin him in a few minutes, talking about Avatar, a side of the movie that I never really broke down in the way that he's doing. It's very interesting. Hang in there. We'll get back to that here in a minute. But this is the month of Movember. For more information about Movember and what you can do to help raise money for male cancer awareness and prevention, join us on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. Scroll down to the Movember banner. Click on it for more information. See what you can do to help us stomp out male cancer and also prevention. I think that's very critical. But without further haste, I do want to get back to our guest because we are getting long into the evening here. But Dr. Young, I'm sorry for interrupting you as you were on a thought process. I hate when that happens, when it happens to me, but unfortunately we have to pay the bills and took a break. So you were laying out the personal aspects of Avatar, which I completely missed. I was all about the corporate greed and how this guy was part of that greed and he had a second thought, and maybe I caught the first layer of the movie, and then you're more into the second and third layer of the movie.
Like everything, there are so many ways to look at it.
Yeah.
My analysis is really an extension of my work as a psychologist. When I see a client, we often talk about dreams, and we spend a lot of time on what this dream might mean. When I go to a movie, especially one like this on the planet Pandora, it's very dreamlike, and I'm immediately thinking, well, what would this mean if it was a dream? If I was having this dream, if I'm Jake and everybody in the audience is Jake, then what does this mean that I'm off in this faraway place? Well, it's a kind of initiatory journey. It's a magical event in a life. Suddenly I can walk again. I've been so crippled, and now I can walk. And then I'm lost in a magical, luminous forest. And then I'm meeting a goddess like a woman. Is she a woman? Well, she's a person with a personality. And strangely, in this story, the maiden rescues the hero. That's kind of a reverse. That's sort of a delight. And she teaches him some things like how to survive in the forest. There are some terrible monsters there. She helps with that. And this is like the monsters that show up in our dreams, our own fears, our own demons, our own terrors, our own mental illness, whatever we have to struggle with inside. Then she teaches him at some point how to deal with a creature, how to ride a horse, and how to connect into this. He sleeps in a giant leaf. When he rides the horse, he has a tendril. It's kind of like a long queue, a long hairpiece that plugs in. This means that part of the story is connecting with nature, and nature, of course, on Pandora is quite vivid and fascinating to us. But all of nature is pretty vivid and fascinating, and one of the big challenges as human beings is to get along with nature, is to be in accord with it. First of all, we are part of nature. We are animals. We have to trust ourselves as creatures and be good to our bodies and trust what our bodies know that our minds don't quite know clearly and consciously yet. We are the horse that Jake is riding. We are the flying creature that Jake rides. And there are some great moral challenges in the story, and they're laid out pretty clearly. They are the battle within us between greed and connection, whether we are going to exploit nature and other people and opportunities just simply for advantage, that's the corporate angle, or whether we're going to try to work out mutuality, become a part of the tribe, honor their traditions, see the beauty in the great tree, and find a way to work it out. And of course, it's a rough story because these two ideas don't merge very easily because of our own stubbornness and defensiveness and self-importance and so forth. But we have in Jake and Neytiri, who gradually becomes his lover, and so we see the possibility of union there, but we see the possibility of making better value choices within the story. And whether one side or the other wins at the end of the drama is not as important as that we see these values clearly as the story unfolds.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I see that. I see that. So you're an insider. So what do you know? What's in store? Can you talk about what's in store for the next Avatar?
I work on some films and not others. I'm not on this team, so I'm just in the dark like everybody else, eager to see where it next. I hope we see more flying banshees. I thought the flight scenes were just fantastic. I like the waterfalls that fall off of floating rocks and things. I mean, Cameron, you got to give it to him for a visual storyteller. He just is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what's going to be fascinating about this show, apparently he's coming out with his, this is going to be in 3D, but you don't have to wear glasses. I think that was one of the reasons why there's such a delay. He has a new technology in which it will have 3D without glasses.
It apparently involves having the film move very, very quickly. It's the actual projection device is very tricky because he's filming it with incredible speed, and it means there are many more images. The classic film was 24 frames per second, and this is, many more frames, and it makes a completely smooth image, so it does not look like you're looking at a movie because there's no flicker at all. It looks like you're looking through a window, and it's all in 3D.
Wow.
It's an amazing technology.
It's going to be incredible. One of the, this is something, since we're talking about movies, and we're coming up on the holiday season, and, this is the time of year which, movies are released and the classics, it's amazing how many people will, if you ask them to sit down and watch a movie more than 3 or 4 times, they'll be like, no, I'm not going to, I'm not wasting my time. But for some strange reason, there's the classic Christmas movies that everybody's watched maybe, 20 times, like A Christmas Story. And for us, Christmas doesn't start in the Norton household until we watch Ralphie, his little red riding. What attracts us as people? Like I said, during the year, we would not watch those types of shows, but it seems that right before the holidays, the Wizard of Oz, usually kicks it off, in November. Yep. And then you got the Christmas Story seems to be the prevalent one now. It used to be, Miracle on 34th Street or 32nd Street. The one with James Stewart in it about, redemption.
Wonderful Life.
Wonderful Life.
Have always needed ritual. I'm still a church guy. I go for, Christmas Eve services. I want to hear the carols all over again. And so, not everybody still belongs to a community of faith and worship, but they're still around and they still give us ritual. But everybody needs their own rituals. So people have family rituals. There's a certain kind of meal that you prepare. There are certain kinds of gatherings that people are very careful to put on. My in-laws are Filipino, so when I go to Christmas family gatherings, now all the food is Filipino food, which is very different from what I grew up in, but it's wonderful stuff, and it has become a new ritual for me, and a relatively recent ritual since movies were easy to get on television first, and then finally on tape, and then now on CDs or streaming or something like that, as it became easy to watch the same movie every time. There are these family rituals of watching certain movies, and they are very inspiring. And let me take a moment with The Wizard of Oz, because it's one of the great classic mythologies of modern time, where we have Dorothy, and we're all Dorothy. We're following her. She's from an ordinary home, not very well off, and it's a little depressed. They're not very financially rich, and they're also pretty stressed and struggling and everything. And she goes on a journey. And one of the great motifs of movies is you take a trip. So we're going to take a trip with Dorothy. She meets Professor Marvel, but he doesn't have very many answers. She's going to have to find a better guru, a better teacher, a better mentor. She ends up over the rainbow. She sings about it. And as soon as she gets there, she really doesn't like being there. She wants to go home. Well, her new mentor, Glinda, says, okay, well, I don't know how to get you home, but if you go talk to the wizard, just follow the yellow brick road. So we have a spiritual guide who's giving us a little bit of direction, not very much. It's like we have a piece of the map. We have the first few steps. Okay, that's all you need to know to get started. And then we gain allies. They're called friends. The Scarecrow, a Tin Man, a Lion. You're not doing this alone because there are others on the journey. Finally, we get to the great place we have sought, and he doesn't help us at all. Meaning the journey was more important than the destination. It's what we learned on our own that turned out to be the important thing. Of course, we had to face the witch. That is, you have to face your own fears. You have to face danger. Your old, small, young, undeveloped self has to sort of die. There's a death and rebirth motif, even if it's only a brush with death. In this one, it mostly happens to the Scarecrow. But there is the real threat of death, and that has to do with not actual death. That has to do with ego death, that a certain sense of the world has to die. It's an immature perspective, has to get out of the way, so that a wiser view of things can emerge, and then we can find our way back home. And when she gets back home, she's become a storyteller. She's going to talk about this trip she's been on, and Kansas could use a little color. It could use some stories about Oz, which is to say, she's not just an orphan being needy anymore. Now she has something to contribute. After the journey, you are to share the treasure. It is part of the responsibility of the honor of getting to go. So that's one. Now, I don't know that people are thinking about, they don't need to think about all that while they're watching the movie. They just need to watch the movie. They just need to come to the end of the movie and say, there's no place like home, which is a good thought on Thanksgiving. And then the Christmas story, we have a kid who wants a rifle, a certain kind of BB gun rifle, a certain kind. It's got to be this exact right thing. Well, no way he's going to get it because, first of all, it's a rather expensive gift and they don't have all the money in the world. And the other thing is it's kind of dangerous. You'll shoot your eye out, kid. You can't have that. This is like the search for the Holy Grail. This story is a study in desire. This is what he longs for. He thinks this thing is the meaning of life. He yearns for that more than anything. He can't believe that there's anything in life that would be more meaningful than having that Red Ryder BB gun. Well, we all have the things we desire. I work with the Hollywood studios on scripts and things. One of the things you've got to have in a good story, whether it's a novel or a TV show or a movie or whatever, is the hero, the protagonist, the central character that the whole audience is going to identify with has to want something. You got to know what the hero wants if you're going to tell a story. Well, he knows what he wants. It's a BB gun. Well, I don't want a BB gun. Maybe I did when he was that age. But we can all understand that we long for things. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's a good job. Maybe it's God. Who knows? But we all have something we yearn for. And that alone is the deepest single secret to understanding our story. Know what you yearn for, and you'll know who you are. Ralphie knows what he yearns for. And of all things, he gets the damn thing. Careful what you wish for. You might get it. And of course, it always works out differently than you think. And he damn near shoots his eye out. Okay, why do we need a story like this? Not just because it's a family ritual of telling it, but because there are actual little secrets to life in that story. Even Dad's fascination with the weird lamp of the leg. You know, he's really proud of that thing. He won something. The guy is not a winner. He won something, and that thing is going to be in the window. It's going to be in a prominent place in the living room as long as he lives. We need to want things, and they mean a lot on a personal level, even if they look ridiculous to others. So there's all kinds of little life lessons in that movie. No wonder it holds up. I think it totally holds up. You can watch it every year, and it's always good.
See, and for me, I watch that show, and maybe that's the yearning. I don't know. Maybe I have to sit down on the couch because I love that show because I love that time. I love that innocence of that time period. Now, I didn't grow up. I was born in the late 60s. So I didn't experience that, but my mother and father were part of that era. And it is amazing. I love talking to older people and hearing about that. I think the old time radio. And so for me, the journey for me now is to figure out why I am so attached to that time frame. Why is my desire? When I watch that movie, the Red Ryder BB gun, but for me, I'm just fascinated by that culture, the time, the way people thought, the way the hardships that family endured. and overcame and all of that. And that just fascinates me. And
I love a period piece, and I'm fascinated with the emotion of nostalgia, that we long for things that happened when we were young, and then things that were even before we were young. Now, we weren't there when we see an old Western or something. Why is that period so interesting? I think we are yearning for the ancient world, even if it's only the 1950s or the 1940s or something like that. Still, it's timelessness. It's something beyond the immediate and beyond the now. It's a larger frame of reference. It's important in learning that our story is an extension of our parents' story, and that's an extension of their parents' story. And it goes back to the immigrants that came over on sailing ships or however they got here, that this is one long narrative that we are a relatively small part of, and it's all meaningful to us. This is why people get so fascinated with Ancestry.com and digging up their roots and all that. I think they get a sense of a longer story that they fit into.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, Sandy and I both did that, and we spent weeks going back, and then once we got to as far back as we did, it's kind of like the journey's over, but every day we were occupied with, all right, what leaf got turned over today, and then when we were able to get back to as far back as we possibly could, then we were like, it was kind of like a movie, and it was over. It was done, or a good book. All right. So we discovered our history. We're at the point to where we can't go any further. With the tools that we have.
It really got kicked off with the TV miniseries Roots, and since then, genealogy has become one of the biggest hobbies in the history of the country.
Yeah.
And millions of people are doing this, and I don't just think they're looking for facts. I think they're looking for something emotional, some larger sense of family, some larger sense of belonging, and it runs very deep, and you only get a few little stories, but they're treasures. They're like little jewels.
Now, from a psychological standpoint, do you think people, when we get into esoteric, like aliens and alien abductions, do you believe that might be someone just trying to act out, to want to be special, or to want to be part of something special? You bullseye. Great, terrific question. Absolutely. That people are looking for something, and it's not just facts about whether the flying saucer could make it through the distance and all that. They're looking for connection, like you just said. They're looking for the same thing that people look into genealogy for, the same thing that people that look into religion for, the same thing that people poke into old stories and mythology trying to find. A larger sense of meaning in life, a larger sense of connection to reality beyond our own skins, that we are so lonely. I think the entire UFO phenomenon is about human loneliness. We want connection. We want connection to each other. We want connection to a community and to the universe, to something larger than the stuff we can see. And the passion is enormous. And people don't have to think all that out. Most of that's unconscious, quite frankly. I don't think people are aware of how much it means to them emotionally to participate in this. Most people say, oh, yeah, it's kind of interesting. No, I just find it kind of fascinating. And this is true. I'm not doubting their report, but I think it is much, much deeper than that. I think it is a deep, deep emotional longing, a spiritual hunger, and I think it is very intense and very important. Wow. Yeah, because I'm trying to think, I was fascinated by what we saw, but I'm not, how do I say it? It didn't change who I was or who I am. I was fascinated. I was inquisitive. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the fact that other people saw it, it's like, okay, I got validation. So I guess that makes it a little bit easier.
Doesn't it make the universe a little bit more interesting?
Well, but you know what? Going into it, I think I feel that the universe is interesting anyways. I mean, I look at it from a purely mathematical standpoint. And, to me, how do I say this? If you came to me, if a ship came, like the Arrival came to us, I wouldn't be, going, wow. I mean, yeah, there is life out there. Because I kind of believe there is anyways. I would be more of the concern, like, why are they here? What's their intention for me?
Right.
It's no different than, if I saw a Russian battleship sitting out here in the Gulf, I'd be sitting there going, I know Russian battleships exist. And so my question now is, why is it sitting in my backyard?
Well, let me look into that in a little bit too, because that's completely reasonable. I think that's completely human. If we had a huge mothership hovering over us, like take the Russian battleship and multiply it by 1,000 or something.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's way, way, way bigger than we are. There's no way if we get into a fight with it, we're bugs. We're toast. There's no way. Okay. So where I go from there is into an awesome feeling of vulnerability. I feel really, really weak in the face of this because that's just logical. And I don't like feeling weak. I like feeling like the tough guy. I want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I want to be able to dominate every situation I'm ever in. And boy, I'm not in that situation. I can go get my little pea shooter because a nuclear weapon is going to be about as effective as a BB gun. I can go get that if I want to, but I'm just going to make a mess. What I have to do is pray and make nice. I mean, make nice big time. I want to get along with whoever's in charge of that mothership. I want diplomacy. I want to work things out in a big hurry.
Yeah.
And that is a part of the lesson of these stories, is to humble us a little bit. Human beings can get so arrogant. We think we're so damn smart, and we don't know much at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to be these stories relativize the ego. That's a kind of a fancy technical term, but they kind of put us in our place a little bit, and that's actually a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hence the name, the Midnight Ocean. When I wanted, because I sail on the ocean, and I've been out, I've been out far enough that if you're in trouble or if you have an issue, you're dead. I mean, let's just face it, you're a goner. And so the name of the Midnight Ocean for me is that the fascination and the wonderment of being in the ocean, because it is beautiful, it's tranquil, especially on a large sailboat, it's just incredible, the experience. Highly recommend it to anybody who has an opportunity to do it. But at the same time, it can be terrifying. It can be scary because you realize you're far enough out. If you have a problem and you sink, you're gonna get eaten by something at the end of the day. It doesn't bode well for your survival. So it's also terrifying, and that's why we came up with the name. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly like you said, just
to play with the name a little bit, that's a great story. Yeah, a sailor has a lot of respect for nature. I'll tell you that. That ocean is your god until you're back in port.
That's right.
But I'm thinking of the what's called the dark night of the soul is sometimes called the night sea journey. And this is entirely spiritual. This is not about actual oceans. No actual sharks were hurt in the making of this story. This is about facing our worst fears, going to the innermost part of ourselves where we do not know what's going on, where the darkness is bigger than we are out of control. Whatever map we had, we can't see. Whatever answers we have don't work, and we are just hoping to get through it. That is a very important spiritual and emotional place. We all get there sooner or later, and how we deal with that is going to have a big effect on how the rest of our life goes. So I'm happy to be on the Midnight Ocean with you.
Thank you. But yeah, you're absolutely, I never thought about that. You are bringing up, I am so glad that we finally had this conversation, because I never really thought about that. Is that, how do you deal with those, does your reptilian brain kick in, or does your higher, amygdala kick in when you are pushed into these issues? And, that's part of that soul searching that we have to do.
Yep.
I mean, what would your recommendation be, when faced with these issues of despair, or when you see that spaceship and that represents, or whatever representation that might be in your life? It might be, a spaceship. It might be a demon. It might be a ghost. It might be a dog man, or it might be the Mothman, or the black-eyed children, or whatever. I mean, what would your clinical psychology, recommendation be?
We can survive fear. fear does not kill us unless you have a bad heart. Mostly you can handle things that are more difficult than you can imagine. We actually have resilience. We are really strong creatures. We can't necessarily overcome it like a warrior. You can't necessarily defeat something larger than this, but you can survive. So have a little faith. And then take a lot of notes. This is really an important, unpleasant, but really an important notion in life. In a way, be a little bit grateful, even though it's scaring our toes off. Be grateful that something so vivid, so dramatic, so significant has happened in life. We want our lives to have moments of great drama, but when they come, we usually wish they'd go away. So be a little bit grateful that it's happened. And then the next thing is, do not do it alone. You are not alone. You are not the first person who ever did this, and you don't have to get this. Have friends, have allies, have mentors, have people you can reach out to. Not only the kind of real in-person people, that is, get on your cell phone and call somebody and say, I need to talk to somebody about this. Are you my friend? Can I talk to you right now? Reach out to our friends, then reach out to the past. There are a lot of people who have faced their demons before us. Some of them have left accounts and guidebooks, mostly in the form of stories. Go study those stories. Actually, it would be good if we studied the story even before things got really bad, so that we had a few ideas of how to deal with it. And also, get mentors and things. Get somebody who's maybe a little further, maybe a little older, knows a thing or two to say, what should I do here? We don't have to solve all of these problems for the first time like we're the first one it ever happened to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's important. Like, I was afraid, how do I say this? I was raised in a good Catholic home and, I was given, there's a story like with me, there was a story of where my grandmother passed a year ago, and my mother gave me the cross off of her casket. And, the cross is, by no stretch of the means, I want to say this, that cross was never, in my mind, ever scary or anything like that. I was afraid of hanging the cross in my house because of the type of shows that we do here. We deal with some pretty, edgy, things. We do talk about exorcisms and devils and ghosts and goblins and ghouls. And I always said I was afraid to hang that cross because I was afraid that would be used as a message to let me know, hey, Jeff, we're here now and we're messing with you.
I got some things I got to say about this, but I know that you've got to go into a break.
Oh, no, I just blew the break because I know we're getting long. Okay. Yeah, I blew the break. So we can do that at the last hour because everybody's dropping off. So the thing is that I took the cross. I wouldn't hang it not because I was afraid that it represented, a demon or anything was attached to that. It was my grandmother's cross, and she was a good Christian, a good Catholic, and everything. But it was the symbology that someone that I would come home and that cross, by some entity would be turned upside down or whatever to say, hey, look, we're now in your life because you've opened this gateway by doing these types of shows and everything. So I didn't hang it, but then it was funny because you said, get someone who knows. And I had Debbie Vici on the show, and she wrote the Wicked series and, she's a New York best-selling author, but in her spare time, when she's not writing, New York best-selling books, she is a demonologist. And she said, look, Jeff, she was like, hey, Jeff, she goes, this is it. This is the rule. When you're dealing with demons and ghosts, just laugh at them. Tell them to go away. Just laugh at them. Don't give them the power to rule your life. Just laugh at them and tell them to hit the high road. And it's amazing that works.
Well, first of all, it's beautiful that your mother gave you this token of your grandmother's love, who was obviously important to you. So that is a loving, a sweet, generous moment, and that part is very positive. And of course, your grandmother's life is a very positive event in your life. So there's a lot of really good stuff here. And then we have death and our fear of death, which is enormous. It should be. I don't want to go. I love Woody Allen says, I don't mind dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Yeah. That's my attitude in general. But so that spooks us. I mean, a lot of people get spooked at graveyards. I mean, there are whatever our fears are, whether it's the fears of demons or ghosts or just dying. We should have a little respect. That is, we're not really big and strong enough. I can't conquer death. It's going to get me sooner or later. So of course I'm afraid a little bit all the time, but I'm trying to deal with that. So it's reasonable to have superstitions and fears of various kinds, and we do what we can. Laugh at it. I also want to have some self-respect. That is, I want to be tender with myself. I want to be gentle with myself for feeling fragile, for having some fears. I don't want to get, impatient with myself that I get superstitious about something. My superstitions are important. They're there for pretty good reasons. And if I need to, hide a cross in a drawer or something like that, I want to be very understanding toward myself. That's not where I would leave it, but I don't want to be rushing it. This is too important to rush. And I think you got very good advice. Laugh at it, sure. Which is to say, our fears are always going to be with us. We're going to need to find reasonable ways to live with them. Wishing they would go away doesn't do much for us. They don't go away. They're too important to go away. So we're going to have to come to terms with them and work out little personal rituals to deal with them.
Sure. Now, and I guess that's the thing, because for me, to this day, I still don't like The Exorcism, which is, I guess, a new movie or not a new show, but a new TV show. I have no desire to watch that stuff, but what's weird is do you find that when people create a void, in other words, like the demon thing used to concern me at night. I mean, I've had those night attacks where you're pinned down and you wake up and you're in that lucid state and something's in your face and stuff. I don't have those anymore. Those don't concern me. But what's weird is that now my concern is abduction, aliens. Well, why is that? Why, I conquered one fear, and why does another fear, jump in its place, fill that void? Why is that just a human instinct? Is that, or is there still a message here that I just haven't picked up yet?
Well, our fears are our fears. That is, they are part of us. They are our property. They are to do with our own inner life, our own demons, our own unconscious. It has very little to do with the UFO. It has very little to do with what's out there. We essentially attach our inner fear to something that is outside of ourselves. So if that one gets solved, we'll attach it to something else. And the work is an internal work, and we can meditate and we can do our psychological work, our spiritual work to get to a better place with that. I will share with you that The Exorcist was the only movie I ever watched that really scared my toes off. It was really awful.
Yep.
I grew up, you grew up in some real religious experience. So did I. Mine was very fundamentalist, and the demons were real, and we were afraid of them. And I came out of that. I came away from that church tradition to some degree, although I'm still a church person. I'm not that superstitious in my theological outlook anymore. But when I saw that movie, it was too close to home for me. And I walked out of the movie, and I was looking around like there's demons all over the place. I was really scared. It did not end, and I did not sleep well. And it kept, the next day I was still scared, and the next day I was still, actively all day long terrified.
Yeah.
And finally, about a week later, I said, I've got to do something about this. I went back and bought a ticket to watch them. It was still in the theaters. I went back to watch it again, hoping that I could make it be just a movie. And it worked because, of course, it was a movie, and every scene was the same. It was, it was a movie. And watching it a second time, it was still all the scary stuff, but I could sort of put it all back up on the screen and leave it there and say, okay, it's like real life, but it isn't actually real life.
Yeah. No, that movie rocked me. I remember watching it at my cousin's in Michigan. I wasn't even in, I was still in elementary school, so that probably was not appropriate.
It's a little early to watch.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, because we were moving, I wasn't even junior high yet. I was still in elementary school when I saw it. So that was probably not an appropriate movie for me to be watching. And that did, it did, and I think that's where I had that fear of the demon and all of that as a kid, because those are images, like I said, they paint into your memories, especially when your memory still, or your mind is still developing. But like I said,
if you got a good Catholic background, you've heard a lot of stories.
Oh yeah, you'd hear the stories all the time, and so, well, as you grow older, I don't, as a kid, but we were rooted into the tradition of the Catholic Church. I mean, I was an altar boy. I've altered boy for archbishops when they would, and bishops and cardinals when they would come to the air bases and join us. So I mean, we were definitely involved in the Catholic Church. I remember seeing we had a priest who was a good friend, that showed us, he spent time with the shroud of Turin, and he actually brought, pictures. And, we were exposed to a lot of the esoteric side of the Catholic religion because of this priest was a scholar priest. He wasn't, he was a traveling priest, but he was also a scholarly priest. And I want to say he might have been even a Jesuit. But regardless, I held that fear, and then finally I got over it. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to prove that I'm over that fear of the things that go bump in the night.
Well, let me comment a little bit about. As I say, I was just at this big conference this last weekend, and one of the experts from the Ancient Aliens, and I won't mention which one, but it started going on. We were having these big panel programs, over 1,000 people in the room, and we each got a certain amount of time to talk. And I was saying the kind of thing that we're discussing on the program here about the psychological symbolism, and this other expert was talking more about the dangers that there's an alien agenda to control humanity, and I finally used my next turn to speak up, and it's the only time I disagreed, because I have great respect for the people doing their research and everything. We don't all have to agree, but I wanted to say that strikes me as mainly a psychological event. That the theorists call it projection. We are projecting our fears. We don't know if visitors mean us any harm, if there even are visitors. We're just getting carried away with our own fear. And fear is a real problem, and it's worth working on. But I'm not going to blame the aliens because I'm scared. If I'm scared in life, it's because I'm scared in life. It's my own fear. It's not their problem. And I don't have to solve the alien problem to stop being so afraid. It's my own business. It's my own terror. It's my own insecurities, which are considerable, and I can do some work on that. And if I get too scared, I'll go back into therapy. It helps. I'm not going to have to solve the whole riddle of whether or not we're being visited from other planets before I can feel better.
Well, the aliens' fear, I like I said, and I agree with you, because it's unknown, but the demonic fear, I mean, it's been very, especially if you grew up in a church, it's very well documented what happens to you.
It does, and it's pretty gnarly. And I keep thinking that some of those religious teachers are really getting off scaring the bejesus out of the little kids. But I also see that as psychological. I think that human fear has been around with us for a long time, and the ancients were very superstitious. They didn't have science. They didn't have as many answers there, so there were demons behind every bush. And demons are real if you want them to be, and you can make them unreal if you laugh at them enough, but also if you come to terms with our own fears that tend to get projected on the demon. This, I think, is more psychological than religious, and I don't think we are being risky or taking chances if we have a little less respect for the history of demons and own them a little more as the stuff of nightmares and a little less the stuff of metaphysics.
Roger. Okay. That makes perfect sense. And I think that's probably the point that I'm getting to as myself, is I'm, the power of, I'm being criticized because we're actually trying to arrange, there's 2 buildings in Ohio. One is a bar, which is supposedly, and you might know about it. It's supposed to have the gateway to hell in it, or, the demon bar in Ohio. And then the other one is where, the movie, Shawshank Redemption was filmed at. It's a prison/sanitarium. And
that's quite a building. It's very impressive to look at.
Yeah. Well, have you seen it inside? Have you been there before, or in your movie days?
No. I just seen the picture.
The picture. Okay. Yeah. So we're trying to arrange where I can actually spend by myself overnight we're going to do 2 shows. We're going to do one from the bar, and then we're going to do another one from the prison. And it's only going to be me locked in to the building by myself. And then of course we're going to do the show from there. And then on top of that, I'll do, take callers and stuff. But
that's great. That is great. That's really, just yesterday I spoke to a high school group. I don't do a lot of that, but the teacher wanted to talk about this time in college. On the campus of the university he went to, there was the haunted house. Somebody had died there, and the university bought it at a good price because everybody around thought it was haunted. They made it into a special, a part of the university, and it was used for various things. But the students were actually afraid of it. So 3 guys decided that they were going to be daredevils, and they were going to spend the night there, and they brought their sleeping bags in there. And they heard a whole bunch of stuff, scared themselves to within an inch of their lives, ended up running out. They didn't end up spending the whole night in there. It was about 2 a.m. They're running out of there screaming. So I hope you have a better experience.
Well, I mean, my whole thing though is this is my belief. I believe that we feed off of other, we are creatures of energy. So you can measure, it's measurable. A lot of our modern scientific methods and stuff, the MRIs, all of that stuff that uses the PET scans, all of those things, feed off of the energy that we have. And so my theory is this, 9 times out of 10, and it goes back to what Lloyd Auerbach was saying, is a lot of it's perception. So, and we also feed. So my zealous to do this by myself is to make sure that there is no other energy around me that is feeding that fear, because you can be in a room with 1 or 2 people and there's little, and this more than anybody else. There are signals, there are things that people that pick up that are not obvious from other people. Yeah. So I want to make sure from a scientific, and I want to hook myself up. The biggest question is can I get a portable EEG? Where I can actually do a brainwave study while I'm doing this, because I want to know what my brain is doing, during this period, and from a science.
If you take the perspective that I take, if you think of it all as psychological, you're better off by yourself, because then you'd only have your demons to face, not all the other guys.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I want to do it. I don't want to deal with other people's issues. I hate to say it. I want to deal with my demons and see what arises out of them. One of the questions that someone actually just asked us, could you ask Jonathan why often sites seem to feed off of rivers, off of bodies of water?
I didn't quite hear you. Something about rivers?
Someone wanted to know, like a lot of these folklore, these sites, these ancient sites and stuff that have, some of these tales behind them. They're usually around bodies of water or close to bodies of water. Right.
Yeah, it is very important symbolically. First of all, the rivers, oceans, lakes are mysterious zones. If you do any scuba, there's a whole world down there. I'm only at the level of snorkeling, but still, you put your face down and you see another universe down there. And then all the old legends of trolls and the mermaids, and that is encounters with creatures or personalities that may be humanoid in form that represent the mysteries of the unseen world below the water. Water itself is a powerful symbol. We are water-based creatures. The human body is mostly water, and so we have a natural kinship for water. But I'm thinking of Wagner's Ring cycle, where the gold is stolen, and it's all about the Rhine spirits and things like that. So that one's about a river, but you have the legends of Atlantis as sinking off into the ocean. So what we have there is a symbolism that represents not only the water of life, but the unseen world below the water, and the dangers of that place, and the possibility that some kind of treasure, whether it is actual gold or wealth or some kind of answers, some kind of life form, or like the legends of Atlantis, the possibility of lost wisdom, lost technology, lost teachings of some kind, that there is something greatly valuable in the unseen place nearby. That is, I live in Santa Barbara, California, so I live right on the ocean. And right there, I can look at that every day. I can drive by and look at the water. Of course, I can't see under it unless I, get a submersible or get scuba gear, somehow get down there. And we know that treasure ships have sunk, that we know that there are valuable things down there, and those are just the literal ones. What's more valuable are the mysteries of Davy Jones' Locker, of the mermaids and mermen, the various stories that have been told about the unseen powers and energies and life forms and stories that take place under that water. Now, what I'm seeing symbolically as a psychologist is the unconscious. What we can explore in the parts of ourselves that we can only see the surface of, like the surface of a lake, the surface of an ocean, that there is far more to us than we know. There used to be an old thing about how we only use 10% of our brains. It's not true. Brain science has proved we used all our brains. We can track about 10%. About 10% is conscious, and the rest is unseen, like an ocean. And down there are vast spaces and vast resources, and if I played my cards just right, I could have access to some of that. I could draw some of that into my more integrated, larger sense of myself and be more effective in my life, be of more service, have a bigger impact. So that's how I see the water legends.
Wow. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about this, and this might not be a fair question, but I'm going to ask it because it just came to me. If all of the mysteries of the universe were solved, how would you think that would affect human consciousness?
We'd come up with some mysteries, I think, for one thing. The other thing is it seems like life would become awfully boring. It's the unknown things that make the whole journey so interesting. I don't know what I'd do. I'm a creature of the unseen worlds. I very much want to stand at the boundary and peer into the fog and try to figure out what more there is to know. So I would not be happy in a life where the riddles were solved.
Yeah. It would almost be like a Neanderthal man traveling in the future, and living in our modern time. Would they absorb so it is of your belief that we would just create other legends, other mythologies?
The legends are our humble and crude effort to try to put a face on the things we do not understand.
Sure.
And the things we do not understand may be gods or emotions, or they're important, and we want to study them. So first of all, we should study all the legends and then try to see between the lines. This is where the decoder ring comes in, where we have to try to figure out what that all represents.
Yeah. See, and to me, that's where the Star Trek series was just so powerful, and because most of the things that we carried into legends and stuff were explained through science in the Star Trek. I mean, I think the only one was Q, right? No one really knew if he was a deity or whatever.
And he was of all the things they encountered, he was the most unpredictable. So they had kind of a trickster god in the story as a wild card, as the thing that could step beyond all their science. Of course, it was partly real science and partly speculative science. So it was at least in the notion that things could be figured out in rational ways, although they were not always successful. But those episodes, those stories, those movies ask the really big questions. This is where sci-fi gets very valuable. It is the spiritual speculation of our time. These are the wisdom stories of our ages. They are asking the really big questions. And, of course, they're packaged up as mere entertainment, and there's usually a battle scene or two just for excitement. But in between the lines, you're asking the large philosophical questions. Are we alone? What are we to do? How are we to live our lives? How can we operate as teams? How can we use the cards we can play well and wisely, even though they are limited? How can we deal with mystery? These are huge themes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why Star Trek, it's such a huge leap, And to me, it's almost anthropological, in nature that, the anthropologists in 2,000 years from now will look back at that and read that and say, wow, or maybe they'll be like, oh, that's why they didn't survive. I don't know. I don't know.
We're looking back at Shakespeare and trying to study and figure out all the secrets in those plays. I do think the literature, the dramatic efforts of our time are mostly in movies and TV programs, and I do think they'll be studied in the future for what we were thinking now and what kind of secrets we were trying to study.
Yeah. No, I agree. Isaac Asimov is another one, which, his whole eclectic series, and we're trying to revitalize. That's one of the radio shows that we're bringing back is one of his stories, which is, if you listen to it, it's one of those radio programs, and even his book, you have to read it 3 or 4 times. It is multi-layered in nature. And that's one of my goals, is to get that one back. So
part of the power of sci-fi as a literary form, whether this is in books or stories or TV or film, doesn't matter. This narrative form is not considered the great literature of our time. This is not high opera. This is not the novel that wins the Pulitzer Prize, or this is popular entertainment. And because it is not given the honor of fine literature or fine art, it can sneak below the radar. It can carry ideas that are actually pretty controversial. It can ask some big questions that we collectively and the powers that be might like to avoid. So I really think there's a kind of proletariat wisdom going on, the wisdom of the common person that knows a thing or two about what's happening. And it will sneak into these stories more than it sneaks into the great literature, the official literature of our time.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know if you remember, was it, who was the actor in it? I don't want to say Spencer Tracy, but it was the Martian Chronicles. Remember that in the 70s?
I remember Ray Bradbury. I actually got to meet him and heard him speak a number of times, and he was kind of quite a profound philosophical teacher. I mean, these were very entertaining stories, but he was taking on some big questions.
Yeah. I mean, well, and like I said, and what was fascinating about that was at the very end, you got the classic scene where the child asks, they're looking into the water on Mars, and the child said, where are the Martians? Yeah. And the dad's like, we are, you're looking at them, kind of thing. So, I mean, that was that whole series boiled down to that one line of, where are the Martians? And it just,
it was a terrific punchline. And we can say this about science fiction in general. Supposedly we're studying space travel or things on other planets or something, but actually we're looking at ourselves. The whole body of literature we call sci-fi is a cosmic mirror in which we are looking at the inner life of human beings, and there's a lot to study there.
Yeah. See, I can tell you, I've never looked at sci-fi the way that you just described. Never. And now you completely opened up a whole nother world for me. And
this is why you had me on the program.
Yeah, this is a whole nother level. We're taking it, and and that's why the importance of and I want to, how do I say? I don't want to be boisterous. I don't want to be grandiose, but this is the reason why I do these shows, is because I hope people come to the same conclusion and say that now there's a whole nother, we've reached one level, and now there's a whole nother level. We bring guests on like you. And now when we look and we observe life, we have to look at it at a different level or different perspective. And it will add a whole nother dimension and a whole nother level of meaning, for us.
Well, and you bring a different point of view on every night. So it's quite a cafeteria you're setting up here.
But what's crazy? Everything kind of falls together. Even we're very esoteric. Absolutely. And eclectic, I want to say. But what's really strange or not strange. I don't want to say strange, but what's really exciting, what's really fascinating, I want to use those words, exciting and fascinating, is there is an underlining thread amongst all of our topics. And it is about self-awareness, being, and it is about that's the thread. We were talking about Sasquatch and hunting, and it was like, you're never going to see a Sasquatch unless you're self-aware. You have to have that mindset before, before you have to open your mind visually to see that. Like, and a great example of that was, our guest showed us live video. And if I didn't have the guest on there, I would have just thought I was looking at trees. And here, lo and behold, I'm looking at this alien figure looking right back at me, blinking its eyes. And then, it's incredible. But I would have never have caught that unless I came back to my cell. I would have never have seen that image. And it was crazy.
All the paranormal mysteries have in common is they're teaching us not to be too smug. Maybe there's some things that we don't already know.
Yeah. Yeah. You're correct. Well, my friend, good doctor, we've come to the end of this journey.
Well, thank you for having me on.
No, is there any, this is the point in which I ask you, is there anything you would like to talk about? Anything that's open, obviously talk about your websites, any books, any movies, any shows that you're doing. This is kind of now I'll shut up and let you talk.
Oh, thanks. Well, we got some of it in. I'm very interested in the way movies mirror the inner life, and I'm doing some writing on that. And some of it is on my website at folkstory.com. There's a section in there called Articles. And we're heading into our 10th season of Ancient Aliens. We're about to film, so that's still on the History Channel, and you can find the episodes on YouTube, but it's omnipresent, and I think they hold up that as I can watch an episode again that are several years back, and I'll see more things because they're so packed. There's so much in every episode that, frankly, I will notice one thing or some things one time, and then years later I'll watch it again and I'll catch something else altogether. I have some books, and they're available on my website. They are on using stories to understand the inner life. They're on folk tales. Some of them are fairy tales, and some is from mythology, the stories of the Round Table, the Holy Grail, things like that. I do lectures around the country. I have some lectures on YouTube that if you Google my name, Jonathan Young, and let's see, actually I give quite a few of them at my own local church, Live Oak. So if you put Live Oak and Jonathan in there, you'll get the various lectures because they are videoed and posted if you're interested. Most of those are based on fairy tales. Some are based on holiday rituals, and they're very accessible, just like our conversation here, that if I try to put it in American English and not get too academic. I am an academic. I'm a professor in psychology. I teach at a couple of universities in California. One of them, Pacifica, has a distance program. People can study mythology or psychological symbolism and things from a distance. Just Google my name because I don't want to give all the websites of the universities where I teach, but now there's online learning so you can take a graduate degree, a master's degree, or a doctoral degree in the kind of thing I've been talking about from a great distance. You don't have to move to do your studies now. So there are a lot of options. If you like what I'm saying, I have a home study course. It's 6 hours audio. It's actually an exploration of the Wizard of Oz as a philosophical lesson. It's taking all of the symbols. We talked about it. We spent 2 or 3 minutes on it, but I can really open up and talk about what the Tin Man might mean in terms of our own personality and who the fake teacher is, that is, who the fraudulent wizard represents, and all of those details. And then I have a day job where I offer courses for mental health professionals who need continuing education for their license. So I do that also, some of it by website, that is webinar, distance learning, and then around the country. Most of that is in California because I'm based in Santa Barbara, and I have a practice as a psychologist. I not only do therapy and have therapy clients, but I do a good deal of consulting with other therapists on their cases and as an advisor and supervisor, and also business leaders, corporate leaders. And I do most of that by Skype. I travel a great deal, so sometimes I have appointments in different cities, but more often it's online now. So thank you for letting me get my long commercial in.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I was going to tell you, make sure that, because I didn't see all the links, anything you want to put on your author page or your guest page, please send those to me, because we'll link those up there. And then, of course, we'll get them added to the YouTube as well. So when people come back and listen to the show or watch the show on YouTube, they'll have those links there as well. So I appreciate it. And it's funny, you talk about Wizard of Oz. That was not planned. That just, yeah. It's weird. You talk about, and with this, I know we said we're going to say goodnight, but the thing is, what's really funny is that when I was sitting here in a chair, I wasn't going to bring up, we had kind of an agenda at first, or I had my agenda, and then you shot your list of questions back to me. And it was weird on how we got to the whole Wizard of Oz thing. I was sitting there going, this would be I need to ask this question about, especially with the holiday season. So it was timely. Right. So it was meant to happen. It was definitely meant to happen.
Thanks for the good questions, and may the muses be with you as you keep this project going.
Thank you, my friend. And we'll be in touch and everything. I definitely want to run some things by you, because now I'm really intrigued with this whole endeavor I'm going to be doing, getting locked in. And so I need to run some things. Well, we want to keep it scientifical. Is that a word? Can I use that word? But no, we do.
And good luck with that. I hope that it lives up to your expectations, and it's going to make great radio.
Well, yeah, but that's not what I'm doing. This is discovery. This is all I want to. This is science. I want to keep this science. I don't want it to be radio. I don't want it to be entertainment. I do want to keep it science. So someone said what I need to do if I want to keep it science is don't tell anybody I'm doing it, and just do it. And then after the fact. But then I'm like, but maybe, who knows? Maybe there'll be someone that will be listening that can give me some good advice, or do something, say, hey, look, do this and see if you can conjure up something. And
I just like a good story, and just doing it, just being there for the night, that's a good story.
Oh, okay. Well, I will make sure when it happens. so right, you can listen in. So there you go. Take care, Dr. Young. I appreciate it very much.
All right.
Bye
Thanks
now.
a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. So there you go, Dr. Jonathan Young, from, a lot of you guys will know, from the History Channel, Ancient Aliens, Amazing Aliens. There you go. There's a title of a new show. But, it's interesting to hear. I never knew that about Star Wars, and the fact that George Lucas got a lot of his ideas, or, some of his ideas, I think would be safe to say, from some of the things that Mr. Young, and more importantly, Joseph Campbell, his writings. So that was intriguing to know that. And, I'll tell you, I'll never look at a science fiction movie the same way again. To me, it was all about aliens, guts, and glory, and spaceships and whatever. But the fact that it is actually internal in nature, and how, and the story, and how we want to, internalize that process. So once again, what another great show. I think this is going to go on one of the classics without a doubt. I appreciate it. Dr. Young joining us. I appreciate all of the listeners out there, for you guys joining us. And sorry I didn't get all of your questions in, but, kind of went through them. Now, we are going to, one of the things that, and I don't know how we're going to do this, and it's not my question to ask how we're going to do this, because I don't know if you guys heard this early on. There is a new board from TELUS that we're thinking about implementing. Now, I personally have asked the question, what do I do? And my higher self is like, no, you don't, it's about $5,000, $5,200 for this board. And this board will allow us to hook phone lines into the system. It's actually a full radio production board, hugely, deeply discounted in price from TELUS. And so one of the things that we are looking at doing, guys, is that we are looking at getting the studio, but I do have to follow my instincts here. I don't know how that's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. I don't know how, but sometimes you got to just step back and let things happen. And that's what I'm doing on this one. So we are looking at getting a way of having you being able to call in. That board will allow us to have up to 12 lines, phone lines. Those are also Skype lines. So you can Skype into the system as well. 12 Skype lines and also phone lines in general. So it is a nice piece of equipment. It's for the price that Telos is selling it to, it's definitely a good deal. But like I said, I have to go with my gut instinct. I know we're going to get it. I don't know how we're going to get it, because the way that I was going to get it was go out and just buy it. But I was told, no, hold off. And so I'll just kind of let you guys know what happens. But I will tell you, by the first of the year, we will have something here in place so that you guys can participate a little bit more with our guests, our callers through the system. And, let's see how it works. I have faith that it will happen and it will materialize, in one way or the other. The easy way is, like I said, Jeff just writing a check and it happens. So, but sometimes the easy way is not the best way. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. Like always, I just want to say thank you to our very special guest, Jonathan Young. And please, if you guys are watching or listening, make sure that you share us on Facebook, social media sites. We would appreciate that very much. That means a lot to us. More importantly than just subscribing, tell your friends and your family about us. Send out emails. Any one of our shows are shareable. Post it on Facebook. If everybody that heard this show today and tomorrow who downloads the show would take the links of this show, post it in a social media site of your choosing, be it Twitter, be it, whatever, Facebook, be it YouTube, if you want, but put it on a social media site. If you just did that 5 times, our show would hit the stratosphere. We would be equivalent to a small to medium-sized market radio. Right now, we're small market. We're AM. And the only way that we're going to be able to grow this, now, I'm doing everything I can do on my end. We are making the contacts with the XDS, with the satellite feeds and the syndication companies. We are negotiating those agreements with them. But I need your help. And your help is as simple as telling your friends and family about us. This is how social media should work. Social media, if you like our show, and obviously you do because you're listening to it, you need to get out there and tell your friends and family about us. Get in the forum groups. There's a lot of forum groups. I was out to Art Bell's, Bell Gab, and there are a lot of forums out there who people are complaining that there's shows like ours. They can't find shows like ours. Well, get out there and tell them about us. Tell them about us. Let them know. And I want it to come from you, the listener. I can do it, but I think that that's not the same as you, the listener, going out there and telling people, going out to Bell Gab, going out to some of the other forums and say, hey, look, if you're tired of the corporate run shows, the shows in which the real topics will never be discussed, there's an alternative. And the alternative is the Midnight Ocean. That's how we grow this. This is how, I've always said organically, I could pay to be on other people's shows, or I can do things financially to get on other people's shows. I know how to do it, but that's not the type of show I want. That's not the type of show that we want. We want an organically grown show. We want our listeners to tell other listeners, to tell their friends and family about us. And if you want to help us out, that's the best way of doing it. And, I appreciate it. And we're getting better. Every day I go back and listen to the older shows and stuff that we've done. And every day we get better. If it's being graphics, if it's being me communicating effectively, finishing my sentences, having clear diction, breaking at proper pronunciation points. We're investing in this, and we're asking you guys to help us to invest. The other thing too is that if you know of a guest that you would like to have on the show, feel free to send them to listener.themidnightocean@gmail.com. That's listener.themidnightocean@gmail.com. Tell me about them. I do read that email and that emails in that bucket, and let me know about them and we'll reach out to them. Also, before we conclude tonight's show, I do want to tell you about Movember. It is Movember. That is Cancer Awareness Month for males, prostate, testicular, all things that affect the male. If you want to participate in that, please go out to our website at themidnightocean.com. Look for the Movember banner on the site. Click on it, join, donate whatever you can. If you can donate $1, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it, because that $1 probably means a lot to you right now in your life. And we appreciate the fact that you care enough about cancer prevention and awareness and research that you're willing to give your last dollar to it. And for that, I will tell you, the gods will definitely return in kind to you. I give you that in great confidence. And I've been told to tell you that. So get out there, do what you can do. We'd appreciate it. On a program note, I will tell you tomorrow's show, it's going to be interesting. We're mixing it up. We do have, as you can see in the calendar section of the Midnight Ocean, we are booking more and more guests again, and we're getting all of those done. And I think we're going to be full for the rest of this month, which is going to be awesome. Thank you for our guests ahead of time for volunteering to come onto the show. And so, but tomorrow we're going to have Carrie Campbell's going to be joining us, and that's going to be an exciting show as well. So like always, I just want to say thank you once again to our guests for joining us, and Dr. Young. It was amazing. I will tell you we booked Dr. Young very early on in the show, and I messed up the dates and double booked them. We then rebooked them, and I double booked again. And Dr. Young was very gracious on the third try to get on the show. And we booked it out far enough, almost a month in advance. So that way we would make sure, and I got it in the calendar, and I locked the calendar so we couldn't have the third try, because I hate striking out. Talk about striking out. Yay, Cubs. Thank you guys for breaking that curse. Now I'm just waiting for hell to freeze over. And I think this winter is going to be pretty gnarly. So, because that was the last prediction when the Cubs would win the World Series, let alone go to the World Series. But, it is that time of night. I just want to tell everybody once again, thank you for joining us. Hey, be well, be safe, but more importantly, as my good friend Ed Roman would say, make sure and be love.
Any set you free. And if you look behind the curtain and then into the mirror, then I think you'll see. Be a messenger, be a radical, be love. Be a messenger, be a radical, be love, be love, be love. Well, I only hope that blood, sweat, and toil catches up with us all. The scars that you get each day make you stronger somehow in some way. Look for your own truth in your heart when it's bold. You know, it may seem like a coda, but I learned it from my Baba. It's not what you believe, it's what you do. It's what you do. It's what you do. What you doing now? Like a vibration occupation in a fraction of an inch. And loving all is one is supposed to be a cinch. Be a messenger, be a radical, be love. Be a messenger, be a radical, be love. Be love. Be a messenger, be a radical, be love. Be love. Be a messenger, be a radical, love, love. Be a messenger, be a radical.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.